Yeah, why don't you ring the bell and everybody come in? What's that? Doesn't matter. Wherever you feel comfortable. We lose a few people at lunch. It seemed like we had more people at lunch. Well, yeah, probably a lot of people were for lunch. We're just here for the meal. Yeah, there's Hisayo. Does this look like everybody? Is anybody?
No, I think it's a couple in the house.
Okay, do you want to? Yeah, someone can go get them. I'd like to start with everybody. Yeah. I didn't hear the bell ring, so maybe it just could have been loud. Are you recording? Say something to the mic. When you say that, I'm always thinking I'm talking to my brother. So. Michael. Are we still waiting on anybody? Okay, well, do we want to go ahead and start? Are you recording?
Yeah.
Is it live?
There's going to be 5 people online right now.
Okay. Okay, so welcome to the last of 2016 Upāsikā days. Congratulations to everybody for your participation over the year. And so for this session here, I don't know, can't remember Jeannie or Jane Gier when we decided these back in April, but I enthusiastically volunteered. Yeah, Jane Gier is not here. She did have leave, okay. So I enthusiastically volunteered to do one on so this is the sort of segment on devotion. And so I volunteered to do one and do it on art and sort of using creativity in our meditation practice. I remember at the time we were talking about it, and And Ajahn Jotipalo was like, I volunteered just to do one on art. And he said, oh yeah, great, we'll do that in devotion. I was like, no, that should be for meditation. No, it should be for daily life. Or, no, it should be for community service. He was like, so I think it could fit in any of the different categories. Even sutta studies, it could even fit there. We can get into that in a little bit. But so now it looks like we're all here. I thought I'd start it a little bit different. You see we got the screen up. I guess even before I start, I should express appreciations to Tankachana and especially to Tanjagaro for helping make this all work. I spent a little bit of time getting everything on the... Speak up?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I spent a little bit of time getting all the information ready, and then 2 or 3 days ago we decided, well, let's figure out, see how it's going to work in the hall, and of course we realized we had some problems. And so we had the technical experts who made it work, so thanks to Tankachana for being patient with me. And but I'll start off with, before I get into too much more, I want to play just a short video. It's like a 3-minute video of our next door neighbor up at Mount Tabor. And all I'm going to say is that the monk that we're going to be seeing, I've known him now for 19 years, just on and off. I've never had a conversation with him. So it's like my knowledge of him is just kind of through observations. I've had a few questions, he's answered questions, but some levels, I kind of know him just by being there with him. And my sort of impressions of him is that he's a very composed, restrained monk, and he probably has a very, kind of very mature prayer life. And so, sort of just thinking about creativity and using that in our practice. Just keep that in mind as you're watching this, and then maybe I'll ask what we kind of thoughts about it after.
Do you need lights?
Yeah, I'll turn. Yeah, that's a good idea. I can turn those down. Yeah, I really love this video. The first time I saw it, because they just posted it earlier this summer, and when we sit in the summertime, we sit up on the top of the hill at the ordination platform, and they have a much earlier service, but after we've done our 5 a.m. chanting, been sitting for about 5 minutes, and then that's sort of the introduction for their call to service at 5:30. So we'll been sitting for 5 minutes, and then we'll hear them, ringing the bell. And so it's just very lovely to, see him actually doing it. And I was talking to one of the other monks there that oftentimes rings the bell too, and there's also foot pedals down the bottom. He was just doing it by the hands, but I mentioned this video and said I was going to use it today. He said, yeah. I says, when it's my turn to ring the bell, I just go over and stomp on the pedals 3 or 4 times, and then go into the church. And so it's a real love of his that he has to be able to give something to the service, give something to the service, give something to his church. You can hear it all the way down the valley, so it's like people all over that live on this mountain can hear it. So, anybody have any thoughts about it or comments they wanted to share? Just seeing that. Yeah, John.
Is that available online?
It is. You can go to their website. It's Monks of Mount Tabor.
Mount Tabor?
Mount Tabor. Tabor.
Okay.
Mount Tabor. Yeah, Jeannie.
Dennis, is that his own creation, or is that a...
Yeah, I don't know.
How's that ear protection?
Yeah, he's not listening to anything else. He's just protecting. The bells are quite large. Right? Talking about those, and those were a gift to the monastery, I think, from the Dutch government to the father who started it. I believe. Yeah, so that was.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, what the bells were again, but they're also, every bell has a name, and they're all ended bird, like Amber. Every bell.
Okay, so we'll come back. We'll be coming back and forth between the screen and videos or pictures. But, just for the kind of outline for today, what I thought we could do is the first part will be kind of more visual arts, more kind of like painting is what I kind of work in. So that's what it's going to heavily kind of talk about, because that's where sort of my practice has been, what I can talk about. And so I'm going to start off with just kind of showing some other examples of people besides myself, just some really quick examples I found of monastics who use sort of arts as part of their teaching style, or just as part of their life. And then I'll talk a bit about some of my paintings that I've been doing, just talk a little bit about the process. I don't want to, I could talk for hours about that, and I don't want to bore you, but I'll see how much you guys want to talk about it. And then I want to get into talking about icon painting, traditional Christian icon painting. That's where my kind of interest is going, and talk about that. Then we'll take a break and come back, and then the title of I think the whole program was the art of being human, and so we were discussing it as the Upāsikā planning group, and some people don't think of themselves as being creative, even though looking out, and I think almost everybody here has some interest in creativity and either being an artist, a musician, or potter, or we got all sorts of different talents here. And so, but just looking at, we started talking about like all the things that we actually just do in monastic training, that if it's not out in art, it's at least like in crafts, but it's all using creativity. And so I've got some examples of that, and hopefully be a lot of discussions around that. I don't know where the day will go, but also in that period, I think we have stuff like just some of the stuff I wrote down to kind of talk about would be like just talking about prose, just even like getting into the poetry and the similes of the Pali Canon. Talk about music. That's why I initially had this thing with the bell, but I thought that would be beautiful to start with, sort of call to worship, so it's calling into our day. But I have some examples of different types of chanting from different traditions, and and then more some like I have this whole thing. I narrowed it down to about 20 photos or so, but it's like how to make our bowl stands. I'll have to remember to bring my alms bowl in, and things like, a lot of the stuff we do, like making robes, making our bowl stands, or things around sort of being creative and making things. So that'll be in the afternoon. But so to start off with, where do I want to start with? So we initially were talking about part of the homework assignment was slideshow. Start slideshow. Yeah. So you gave a link to Ajahn Sucitto's book Dana the Dhamma, and if you read the introduction, he was saying that I think he said he just started off with he wanted to do a kind of a calligraphy, a version of the Metta Sutta, I think it was. And he just sort of did it with the calligraphy, and then just did a couple of little drawings on the side, and kind of I imagine it was sort of like the writing down across the bottom is how he was doing it. And the people really appreciated it, and so he expanded on that, and then it just started into drawings, and one thing led into another, and then he started this whole series of writing out the very first sutta, the Buddha, the Dhammacakka Sutta. And then this was he did a series of, I think it's like 25 or 30 paintings, and he ended up presenting it to Lumpur Sumedho as a gift, and then Lumpur Sumedho encouraged him to write a sort of commentary about it, about all the drawings. So then this became the book. But one point, Tankachana here actually had the idea of having a recording playing of the Dhammacakka Sutta being chanted, and then showing the particular photograph or the painting that was relevant to each one of the, that was being chanted. And it was interesting that as he was doing that, I'm sure we're probably sure Ajahn Sucitto meant to do this, but this is like photos 17, 18, 19, and 20 in the sequence. And the whole sutta, say it's around the Dhammacakka Sutta, which is this kind of the hand mudra that the Buddha has there. And so it becomes sort of the central theme. And as you read his commentary about it, it's sort of like, here he is, kind of the Buddha in the kind of the worldly realm. And then as you keep going into higher and higher heaven realms, of course, everything gets more and more and more refined. And so as you'll see is like the imagery gets more and more refined. But the only thing that stays kind of the same is the center point of the painting with the hands. And so you'll see what happens. But if you're just looking at the book, or you're just sort of reading it, or just looking at his photos, you probably wouldn't have even picked up on that. So this was a really clever way of kind of seeing what Ajahn Sucitto was maybe trying to get at through using his artwork to make a point visually that if you read his suttas would be the same thing. So arrow key. So this is I think the Yamadevas. And this is the Tavatimsa, Tusita Devas. They have the heavens of bliss. This is the Nimanarati Devas, which are the Devas who delight in creating, and the Devas who delight in the creations of others. You see and then this is the Brahma realms. Now you're not even, hardly any there's no form at all, this sort of energy. Oop, that was it. Thought there was one more where it's just the hands, but maybe not. You can see just the central. So this was just one way that Ajahn Sucitto had used, sort of visual art to be able to express teachings. And also, I think just for him also a way of using his creativity and focusing on a particular sutta, sort of his like devotion to that. Then something really simple here would be Ajahn Amaro. I just went to his journals when he did a tudong up in. I think this is the long road north. These are just drawings that he did as he was going along. This is just kind of to show that. I remember at one point somebody was telling me in the early days of Amaravati that maybe like 75 to 80% of the, maybe even 90% of the monastics that were living there were all sort of artists of some sort. Like I remember blanking on names right now, but Ajahn Sundara was like a dancer, ballerina. One of the nuns was actually the drummer for Def Leppard, the band. And she started what was called the Bhakti Underground. So there was at the Amaravati, there was a whole group of monastics that were getting together and playing bhajans and Indian instruments, and so they had this devotional sort of music group going on. And but other people had been musicians or artists, and so finding outlets. And so this is a couple of drawings of Ajahn Amara's. This all just came from probably just on his tudong as he was walking, just sort of just doing drawings of things that were actually happening on the tudong. This is just a really simple drawing of his spoons, that his spoon that he had. And then this here is, I'm going to go larger on this. This is a Ajahn Jotipalo, who's a senior monk at Chithurst Monastery. And he does these just really wonderful, here, that'll get it on there. There's these really wonderful line drawings, and these are little, I've seen, when I was there was an ordination happening. I was there just last year. There was an ordination, and he had this drawing. It was really spectacular. It was they had these oak beams inside the meditation hall. So it's like as you walk into the hall, it's like just seeing how the oak beams would be looking if you walk in from that perspective. But then you had the Sangha sort of, all bowing to the Buddha image and the three candidates who are ordaining sort of there. You see them sort of from like this top view, like a bird's eye view. And then kind of behind the whole thing, like you can almost see in these pictures here, like the black across the top and stuff like that, kind of like the universe. So it's just like, it was like just out in like completely outer space with stars and planets off in the background. And it all worked, and it was really quite beautiful. They weren't nearly as detailed as this kind of drawing. But I also saw one drawing he did of kind of more like the one on the left, and it was a card he made just for the construction workers for like Christmas or one of the holidays, and it's just this picture of Chithurst House and all the sort of construction that's happening around it, and like all the events that happened throughout the year. I guess there was a big flood, so there's this scene where there's a flood across the bottom, and there's a scene where I guess one of the workers must have been misbehaving and sneaking off and sleeping when he wasn't supposed to be. And there's kind of a joke: "Has anybody seen Dave?" And there's these Z's coming out of the attic, and stuff like that. So just really playful use of his time. But I asked him, I said, "When do you find time to do this?" And he's an older monk, probably one of the oldest that we kind of have in our Western Sangha. I think I have a picture of him. Yeah, that's him right there. Yeah, Ajahn Jotipalo. And so he said that he doesn't actually need that much sleep, and so he'll go when he gets back to his room at night. He'll start working, and then he'll get tired and he'll lay down, and he'll just wake up an hour or two later, and so he'll get up and do some stretching and exercises, and then he'll just sit down and start doing it, start drawing again, and get in a couple hours, and then might feel a little tired, so he lays down for a half hour, and then it's time for morning puja. And he says, that's all he needs, just just being creative, and you just found how much sleep he needs. But I just really like that. Yeah, just finds the right time to do it, and what works for him. And I've kind of found that for myself as well. Like if I try to paint almost every night when I get back to my cabin, and if for some odd reason I can't, or we're busy, and I don't get to paint, I actually feel like I need way more sleep than I do when I am painting. So that's one of the things I wanted to maybe talk about in my own process. But I can easily get by for like most of a week on like 4 or 5 hours of sleep if I'm doing my painting. My mind is energized. But if I'm not, then I feel like I'm way more physically tired. So that's some examples of sort of like some drawings that happened. I wrote to Ajahn Menindo, who's a Harnham monastery in the northern part of England. And if you go to his website, you can just type in Harnham, or you just look at our calendar. I think he's actually the one that does the calendars that we send out every year from the Sangha Forest newsletter. So you see he's got a real beautiful sense. He actually sent me a photograph of this exact same perspective, and this was a house I think they just purchased next to the monastery, and it had been like a lazy boy chair where that chair was. There was a bookshelf and a television set, and it was just kind of like a scene from the 1950s or something, and just really uninspiring, looking cluttered. And then he showed the process of them ripping everything out and repainting, and just putting this little tree branch there at the firewood, and just having this really peaceful spot where guests can go and just have an uncluttered space for an uncluttered mind. So I think these are all photos he sent just of this new building. You can see it's just real simple, clean lines, and I went to their website, and there wasn't anything that was everything was beautiful, but it wasn't anything I was kind of like really looking for. He has a really beautiful garden, and just all the buildings are just kind of like white and clean. And I immediately thought of him when I was thinking of trying to show some sort of like sense of art. It's like interior decorating or gardening. He's a very skilled in that. So there's some examples of that kind of practice. Then this is my favorite. Let's see here. This is Ajahn Anek. And can you say anything about him, Tankachana? You visited his monastery.
Yeah. Ajahn Anek I think it's abbot of what? Sanyang or something. Unfortunately, I can't remember that. He's a close friend of Lumpur Liam, junior to Lumpur Liam, and he has a monastery. I think it's literally monastery with a beautiful banyan tree, but it was basically, I think it was rice fields before he started, and I believe the story goes he had basically for a couple of years the municipality garbage dumped there, which provided enough fertilizer for him to grow a forest. And so 20 years later, when I visited, most of it is forested, and it starts to fit the name, beautiful banyan tree.
Yeah. So he's a sculptor, and you'll see there's a picture in here later where, I don't know if he does this all the time, but he'll just, after evening puja, he'll just go out with his bench grinder and, start sculpting, and he looks like, some of the other monks are kind of interested and help out as well, and so he's very creative. And looking at the photos that I had to choose from, he has lots of sculptures all throughout the monastery, and also he does other things too. There's a picture of, I think it's like Ajahn Pasno and Ajahn Amaro and Debbie and Lumpur's mother, Rhoda, and he's like in a place where it looks like he receives, because I've seen many pictures of him there, and it's just all these sort of like found wood objects, and it looks like there's people have carved birds and things into the wood, and Tankachana was saying that when he has guests in there, stuff like that, he'll like start using them as kind of teaching, or to talk about nature or talk about the birds. So it's really quite spectacular. So I'll show you. Yeah, so here he is working on one of the pieces. And this was I actually saw it's a Buddha image, and it's quite large, and it was like a whole bunch of different pieces put together, and it was for some technical college. Like, I don't know if he donated or like commissioned it or how it happened, but and here they are, kind of late at night, working on it. Yeah, here's all that kind of found wood and all the, like you can see, like right here, looks like an ostrich head right there, and there's a bird there, and looks like it's something right here.
And this behind us here is about, I think the hall goes about 50 feet back, and both walls are, both walls are made up very, well, they're not really walls, it's more like just sort of a natural barrier. It's part space, so it's hard to describe, quite a unique place.
But this is an indoor.
You can see right here, it's like, right there, it's like outdoors.
Yeah, it's kind of half in, I mean,
A little bit of enclosure.
the rain doesn't fall on you. It's got a roof of some sort that I never quite figured out. But it's not, but there's definitely no door that you have to walk through to get outside. It's just a gap in the wood.
And what's the typical use of this room?
This is where Ajahn would see his guests. You can see his seat there. So he'll be sitting on that seat, and the guests will be, behind on that mat, and you can stretch, say, 15 rows of them back if you want to. So he could give a Dhamma talk there. This is always, I would always be sitting a couple rows back when I went to visit, and they would have, over on the left side here is a small sort of area for preparing nampana, or the drinks. So they'd always be coming out, and they always gave us nice drinks.
There's that receiving area. This is an outside sculpture kind of area, and I've seen a close-up of this one. It's really quite beautiful.
And this is in Northeast Thailand?
Yes. It's not too far. It's probably about a 1 hour drive from Wat Nanachai, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what I wanted to kind of show. Just, and there's many different examples. Like I know of monks who are and nuns who are very good writers, and just not just sort of giving Dhamma talks and having those transcribed, but do poetry, and some are. Ajahn Jotipalo, who used to live here, very talented singer, and so he and was then Ajahn Gunawudo, who's also lived here for a while. They made a CD of Ajahn Jotipalo doing some chanting and some little background music, and so you see lots of examples of people doing it. So I wanted to show this kind of just to justify why I do what I do. So it's like I can say, okay. Especially when I was really happy when I saw Ajahn Jotipalo, because like, okay, great. It's not totally outside the normal tradition, but so get into so. Before I get into sort of the paintings that I did, I'm going to leave the lights down if that's all right. So we don't keep coming back and forth, but I can kind of see like 2 or 3 sort of phases for myself when for myself getting into painting. And the short story is that it was about 10 years ago. I was visiting my parents, and the way I like telling stories, I stayed there a little bit too long, like over a week is way too much for a monastic to be visiting his parents, and probably for any of us visiting our parents. But and so my mom had just bought these fabric paints, really cheap stuff you paint on, like say T-shirts, and I was kind of intrigued by them, so my mom let me borrow them, and I was getting ready to move to Arrow River Forest Hermitage, where Ajahn Punadamo lives, who was just here a couple of months ago. And I knew I'd lived there as a layperson, and I knew all of his artwork was like 30 or 40 years old and starting to really fade really bad. And it was all actually, none of it was Theravadan images anyway. So I thought, oh, I'm going to do a series of like 3 paintings for him. And I took them from photographs. One was the stupa of Ajahn Chah's monastery where they cremated him. And one was a really famous picture of him sitting in a wicker chair. And another one was monks going on alms round through this rice field. And so I just started painting it, and I was kind of shocked that they turned out halfway decent. I had been an art major in college, but I'd never intended to be like, I never wanted to work in the kind of as an artist. I wanted to eat, so I didn't want to starve to death. And it was a liberal arts education, and I ended up actually just majoring in it because liberal arts, you have to take classes in every field. And my freshman year, just to fulfill my requirements, I took an art class, and my art professor had the most warped sense of humor, and nobody in the class would ever know when he was making a joke, and I always did. So it was like he and I hit it off really well, and so he offered me a job in the summer. So I ended up working for the art department, and then he ended up just liked him. So I took another class, and I was like, hey, I'm halfway to a major already. So a lot of it was art history. So that's why I kind of never really intended to pursue art, but there was obviously some interest. I was thinking about this the other night, that because I went to study chemistry, was what my love was in high school, and but I remember, I don't think I would have been able to say it this way, but I started thinking about it this week, and I remember like just being in the art classes, like being presented with a challenge or some sort of problem solving that you had to do to present something in art. And the way I think of it now is like when I think about like my own artwork, like if I'm trying to figure out a problem or wanting to take on something completely different in my painting style, like I feel like parts of my brain lighting up. It's different than sort of like trying to solve a chemical problem. It's like I found that boring, or just sort of reciting something else someone said, but I didn't see it as being creative, or it didn't spark any spark. It didn't spark anything, but art did, and so it made me feel alive, or there was a real interest in that. So I think that ties into, it's like when I am painting, I get by in a lot less sleep because the brain is energized, whereas if I'm just doing what we do normally here, then it just goes into kind of more of a normal mode. So after sort of just getting started, I decided to, even though I had majored in art, I never really did too much with, say, portrait painting or the human form. I did a little, but I never felt comfortable, which most people don't. And so I decided just to take it on as a challenge to the painting right above Tankachana here. I decided to see if I could get to where I could paint that relatively. I wasn't trying to get it photorealistic, but I just wanted to see if I could master trying to do a portrait. And so it took me about 3 years. And I remember 2 years ago I was at a icon workshop next door with Father Damien, and he was explaining to people his process of learning. And he said, for the first year, he said, like I was after about a year, people finally realized I was trying to paint people. Just exactly, everybody started laughing, but I didn't. And he looked at me and goes, you don't find that funny? I go, no, I totally understand what you're talking about. I give some of my paintings away, and people go, oh, this will make a great pot holder. What is it? I said, it's a picture of Ajahn Chah. Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. So I'll show you some examples too, so you can judge for yourself. But so I just took that as a challenge, actually, and I took it on very specifically, like in terms of meditation, like what is it, what happens in the mind, what happens to your moods, your attitudes, your energy levels when you're trying to learn something new. And so that was my entire intention behind it. And but then I stopped painting after, I got that down to where I was 90% of the time I felt like it was at least a good enough painting that I could give it away. So let me see if I can show you a few things that I've talked about so far. But I think I can see like 3 different phases of what I was doing. And so I have these here actually in person. This is like one of the very first that's what I was trying to do right there, and that's what I was doing. So not bad, but not great. Oftentimes, yeah, I'm probably the most critical one in the room. And then, fortunately, though, this was the very first painting I did when I was at my mother's. There was the second attempt at doing the same painting. So I look at it now, it's like, well, fortunately, I had at least enough success that at least I had an interest to continue it. Like if it had gone totally terrible, but the photograph was actually that's my favorite photo of Ajahn Chah. And it was funny, Thangka Chanda just gave the Dhamma talk a couple of days ago, and he actually used this exact saying on the bottom. I didn't even realize I had this painting. Just for the class, I have a little box of my stuff, and I just pulled out this painting that morning, and then Thangka Chanda actually used that Dhamma quote there. Yeah, maybe. Wherever you have feelings for love or hate for anything whatsoever, these will be your aids and partners in building parami. The Buddha Dhamma is not to be found in moving forward, nor in moving backwards, nor in standing still. This Samedo is your place of non-abiding. And so, I remember when we were talking about this at midnight tea, and one thing, this was a letter that Ajahn Chah wrote to, part of a letter that Ajahn Chah wrote to Ajahn Sumedho shortly after they started Chithurst monastery. And, to me the significance of that is it's pretty close to kind of a sutta that kind of says the same thing about sort of crossing over a river. You can't cross over the flood by pushing too hard or by standing still. And so, but I kind of take this as, this was Lumpur Cha's sort of, his instructions to Lumpur Sumedho about becoming, the abbot of a brand new monastery. It's like, there are going to be difficulties. You are going to have loves and hates. You're going to praise and blame. And, it's like, that's your practice right there is the, building paramis are perfections. Like, there's the 10 perfections of generosity, morality, wisdom, things like adhitthana's determination, such as truthfulness, loving kindness, equanimity, and probably missing a few Kanti's patience. So so just all of those wholesome qualities that the parami seems like anything we're doing, things we're doing that we get praised for, things we're getting blamed for, as long as it's a blameworthy thing. But just even that blame can be what is our practice. So let's see, what else did I have here? Then this is where I got to, this one's actually quilted, so it's there's quilting, what you call it, batten that's behind it, and use a sewing machine to sew around him and sew the robes. So I got to where I could do, this painting here, to look, close. That's not the exact same painting there as this one, but I got close, and then that's when I kind of, I've actually achieved my goal. So I actually set the paints down. I was living in New Zealand, I think, about the time I finished this one, and didn't pick them up for 2 or 3 years. Then what happened was we were doing a winter retreat, and it was when we take sort of periods where we do complete group practice or complete solitude, just the meal and a reading is the only thing we do communally, and then some practices where it's just morning or just afternoon. But it was a period where we were having complete open schedule, and for some odd reason I got up real early in the morning, and it was a really nice winter day, and so I was out doing walking meditation and looked down. It was time for breakfast, so I walked down at breakfast and just did walking meditation down here all morning, and then walked up and just started doing walking meditation in the afternoon. I looked down, it was 4:30. I've been doing really walking meditation for almost 12 hours out of that 4 to 4. Went and made a cup of tea at the sauna, and then went back, and I was exhausted. I was just physically really tired, and at that point it was about 6 o'clock, and I was thinking, I just wanted to go to sleep. I was just really physically tired and mentally tired. I was like, I just want to go to sleep. It's like, I don't want to, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, that's too early to go to bed. And so I was like, I can't do walking meditation, I'm too tired, I can't do standing meditation. Even if I read a book, I'm going to fall asleep, and if I just sit here, I'm definitely falling asleep. And all of a sudden I had this memory that I had 4 drawings almost exactly like this of Ajahn Chah that I had done, say 3 years earlier. And they were just in the drawing, sketching form of it. And right before the winter retreat, a bunch of us were passing around a book from on the Native American Lakota and spirituality, and we just read this, and it was by about this man named Wallace Black Elk, who's kind of an adopted son of Black Elk Speaks, the famous Black Elk, and he was kind of adopted by him. In the Lakota, it's like if they take you on as a student, you actually physically are part of their family. So like, my mom's best friend is his sort of, she has 2 families. She has her Lakota family and then her biological family. And she treats them exactly like her biological family. So this Wallace Black Elk was like that with Black Elk Speaks. And so all of a sudden I just had this image of 4 Buddha images painted in Lakota as like Native Americans in Lakota colors of black, white, red, and yellow. And so I started painting. I just said, okay, made a few little adjustments to Ajahn Chah's face and made him into a Buddha and started the paintings. And it was about 6:30, and I looked down, all 4 paintings were finished. And they're not, you'll see here in a second, they're not the highest quality ones I've ever done, but they were all finished. And I looked over at my clock and it was 3 a.m. Like 9 hours had just gone like that. And I was wide awake. Before I was like, couldn't keep my eyes open, but I was wide awake, 3 a.m. And so I just sat in meditation till it was time for breakfast, and then went down, and Ajahn Pasna was down here, and so I told him about it. I cannot believe this. I stay up all night long, and I'm wide awake, and he's like, pay attention to that. Pay attention. And so then after that, I just started painting, but more paying attention to that, to sort of like, how is this affecting my mood, my energy, enthusiasm. And then since then, so like from then until just about 6 months ago, my practice has been much more about just being creative and having fun with it and doing all sorts of different things. One thing about my process is that, I tried to look at, say, like other traditions of painting, especially in Buddhist culture, sort of like looking at Tibetan artwork or looking at Thai artwork. And if anything, the only thing that really ever kind of spoke to me at all was Japanese, the kind of culture. But they're not so much into images, or the human form, which is what I was trying to paint. They are a little, but I didn't really find anything that spoke to me. And so I was like, I knew that. So I just sort of was exploring on my own, sort of dabbling, taking things here and there from different traditions. And also, from the very beginning, I've never liked this paint, but it took me 3 years to sort of figure it out. That was part of that initial process, was just how do you mix the colors, how do you get them to look like flesh. And so after about 3 years of getting that knowledge, it's like, well, it was easy just to stick with that. And so even though I've never liked this, I decided just to keep with it because I was still learning and still experimenting. I never cared what the image looks like. It's like, yeah, you want to do something beautiful, but to me it's always about learning. That's the whole point of it, and the energy that comes from it. And so, but you'll see, I think I have some examples where I can pick out some others, but I did some things that, well, what I did do is, like I said, I didn't really connect with the Tibetan artwork. And if you look at Tibetan artwork, it's like, they have demons and all sorts of things in the paintings. But if you understand what those are about, it actually makes sense, and I can find inspiration in it. But in art from my culture, we're in Indiana, we didn't have too many demons in our artwork back in Indiana. But so I just didn't, I wasn't connecting with it. So I had this idea of actually doing like Thangka paintings, and I was thinking of doing them like, having Ajahn Chah as the center since he's our teacher, and then having scenes around it, like they have demons or things around happening in the painting, but having scenes from around the monastery, like things that we do here, like washing bowls or giving Dhamma talks or splitting firewood. And so I started doing that, but at the same time I was coming to understand Tibetan artwork a little bit more, and it's, I still might try that as a painting, but it didn't seem to make sense, or I kind of moved on from that, but I was still exploring. And so let's see what I have here. Yep.
put bright light.
Which light do you want off?
And,
You want them on?
or we can experiment.
I don't think we can just turn those on.
Oh no, it's about this one side.
Mm-mm.
Oh, just,
Might be able to turn just the shrine on.
just do one.
Might be able to turn these on over here. Does that help?
That's good.
Okay. So the bottom one is the one that I said, I kind of painted that one to where it kind of got to where I was happy with it. You can see those are like 1x6s on the board there, so it's like 20-inch tall painting right there. But the ones across the top, those are the Lakota ones. So the one on the right and left were extremely crude, but the middle two I really kind of liked. And this is I called this one Karuna, like compassion, but even that's it's a pretty simple version. Oh, the beautiful thing about the story was though, is my mother's best friend was an anthropologist, and she lived with the Lakota tribe and was adopted, and I sent these to her, and I told her the story that we'd read Wallace Black Elk, and she goes, Wallace Black Elk is our next door neighbor. He's passed away, but that was our next door neighbor, and so her sister was still there, so I sent these to Wallace Black Elk's sister. It's just the coolest story. And so this is what got me started the second time around. And then this is one of the examples of sort of like practice inside the monastery. This is my favorite painting. That's Tan Titapano right there, and Tan Pamuto. It was, I think, a communal work day. We had this whole line of people sort of passing fire. I think Neil was here for that one, and that's the day that we hauled all the concrete. Dennis was there in the morning when we hauled the concrete, or all the gravel down to Ajahn Jotipalo's cabin. And we kind of just did this at the end of the day. Let's see. Probably do this just by, and then this was just a couple of monks on Tudong. They were in Thailand, and so I made Ajahn Jotipalo just come back from his Tudong down to Los Angeles. He kind of started in San Francisco and walked down, had a whole bunch of Dhamma talks and stuff like that. So I kind of made this as a fake, as a joke, kind of book cover for him. It's, just stories of monks on Tudong. It's Jataka tales are the stories of the Buddha's previous lives. I made a joke out of it, called it the Jataka tales. And we were in a van going down to San Francisco, and I made that joke, and Ajahn Jotipalo I thought he was going to fall out of his seat in the van, so I thought, okay, I'm going to do something with that. And here's where I got in. This is my creative phase. And what I started doing with these is I would paint the central Buddha image. And obviously that's the Buddha image right here. After a while, I kind of found that it was much easier just doing Buddha images, because you can be a little more expressive with that, or you don't have to worry if it looks exactly like it. Like if you paint Ajahn Chah, but the eyes are off 1 millimeter, everybody knows. So it's harder to do. So for doing the Buddha images, they can all take on their own personality, and I don't have to worry about it so much. But what I started doing with these, I did the series of like 5 or 6 paintings like this, where I would paint the Buddha image, and then I would just sit there with my paints and just sort of like, this kind of sounds weird, but I just like let one of them speak to me. And so I'd pick up, and it'd be the red. So I'd start painting like, I wouldn't use red, but start painting with red. And then I would just let that dictate everything else that I did, just totally be in reaction to it. So, and then this was fun for me, because it's like the Buddha image is our Buddha image here is the Borobudur. It's out of Indonesia. It's a stone carved Buddha image, and what we're copying, and so that's sort of Indonesian. The devas in the background there, those are kind of Thai art. Is where I got that image from. But in the borders is Islamic art. I was really intrigued by Islamic art for a while, and so in Thailand, it's like southern Thailand is influenced by Islam or is Islamic, and so I just thought this was kind of an interesting melting of different cultures. But being the Abhayagiri American image, which is from Indonesia, the Thai art with Indonesian influence, and then this is what I was doing probably the last 2 or 3 years, just sort of more of like a Tibetan imagery behind it, with the Buddha sitting on a lotus flower, which he's doing in the Buddha image here. He's sitting on, most Buddhas are sitting on a lotus, and then Tibetans often have the halo kind of disc behind them with the circle behind them. And so I kind of slowly developed it, like making the flowers larger and smaller, and just getting the proportions of everything right. So it took many years to just playing around with this kind of one image. I just liked this particular. That's again the Abhayagiri image right here, and just playing around with that. And so then I thought I would just show. I do have. We can hit a break or something. I can show you kind of I have the real paintings here of all of those that I've shown you, and this one here. But one thing I just wanted to show is I think really anybody can do this, the same stuff that I've been doing. And I have one where it's actually a fourth painting, so it's just the flesh. So like when I get back to my cabin, if I don't feel like painting that night, what I can do is I'll have these drawings, and I just take the cloth that people give us to make robes with, and iron them. They're like 8 by 11 little pieces of canvas, and I don't iron them or anything. But here's kind of you can see the size of them here, and like this one over here. I'll just do a bunch of drawings. I might do a dozen drawings in an evening, just to get them on the paper or on the cloth. And immediately, if the drawing just doesn't look right, or I do something wrong, then I don't even try to correct it. Just move on. And then the first thing I'll do is I'll do just the flesh. So I'll do, once I get the colors mixed up, I'll just do 6 or 10 paintings just of the skin tone. And sometimes they're about 50 or 60% of them will work, and the other ones don't. So I found it just really hard to correct it once it doesn't work with this particular type of paint. And then just slowly just build up and to that finished one on the right. And then really quickly, I was doing this image here. This is this kind of the same night, or same time I was doing it. I was playing around with just the Buddha image was exactly the same, but I was just playing around with the background colors. And the reason I was doing that was to say compare this one, kind of the brown versus this one with the green background. And I did multiple different ones like turquoise or red or browns, and just to see what the effect would look like. And I was doing them just as studies because 2 months ago I went over to Mount Tabor, and which is the monastery next door. And the abbot there is an icon painter, and a really, really good one. And he teaches icon painting all over the country. And he's invited me a couple of times to go over there to do workshops. So he was gracious enough to let me do a Buddha image, and it's actually this one right here is the one I did. And so this was when I decided, okay, I'm going to try to do something like this, but I'll give a kind of a warning. It's like I didn't care what the image again looked like. I was just over there because I really wanted to understand the process of icon painting. And so I'm already processing into the third part here now. So this is the looking at that. So this was the image that I did when I was there, and so you can see it's similar. And but it was interesting. It's like when I look at this painting, when you do a traditional sort of like Christian icon painting, I just love the whole process actually, because it's when listening to Father Damien talk about it, it's like he's a traditionalist, so it's like everything is done, like they would have done it 800 years ago. So like this maybe we can pass it around later, but the icon this one is painted on an oak board, so if you pick it up, it actually's got some like weight to it. It's like it's from the earth. It's a tree, and I was like, Jesus, or like the Buddha was born under a tree. He was enlightened under a tree, and he died under a tree. So it's just like the earth element is having this the tree, and then everything in the icon is is from natural products. And so right now I've been going over all this week to learn how to actually make the boards that you do it on. And so somebody very generously offered some really nice redwood, and so you sanded it down, made it into the proper size boards, and then you put 3 layers of rabbit skin glue down. And we went actually last week over to the world's best manufacturer of pigments is in Willits, California, called Natural Pigments. And like if you're an icon painter anywhere in the United States and you're ordering pigments, you're getting it from Willits. So Steve didn't even know that the best pigment manufacturer in the world is in Willits. And well, I was asking him, I said, is there anything vegan? Is there a vegan product you can sell? And what he pointed out is that rabbit skin glue is not made out of rabbits. It is hides, but he said it's usually like other animal, like livestock animals that are, like for the meat industry, and those are just the hides that they're not, they were just going to go to compost, and so it's as he pointed out, there's nothing dyed in the process for making the glues, so that felt a little better anyway, but it's you use this hide glues, and it's like 3 layers of glue that you put down. Then you put a cloth, linen that's been soaked in the glue. And you put that down, you let that dry overnight. And then you put, I think it's like 11 layers of gesso, which is also sort of the same glue with marble dust. It can be any kind of white sort of powder, but chalk or alabaster, marble dust is what we were using next door though. 11 layers of that, and you sand it down, and it gives you this really hard surface. And Father Damien loaned me, here it is. Can you pass this around, Kachana? It's a board, and on the outside you see just the wood with just the glue on it, and then with the linen glued on top of that, and then the 11 layers of the gesso on the outside. And I think he did this intentionally, but he made it really lumpy, just so you can kind of really get a sense of it. And then the back side is what the whole surface will look like. And you'll see it's really smooth. It's almost like marble. And the intention of it is you're trying to make something that's extremely stable. So it's like, as Father Damien points out, like, the first icon paintings in the Christian tradition were painted 800 or 1,000 years ago, and they're still like almost perfectly intact. So it's like if you, because of the way that you use the egg yolk for the medium, and then just mix in the pigments. And it was funny because he was telling me, and I actually gave a Dhamma talk about this a while back, last week, that he was saying it was so strong because the pigment actually sort of encapsulates all of the egg, encapsulates all the pigment so it can't like oxidize. But then we were up at the professional, the pigment manufacturer, and he says, no, that's actually not true. We didn't even tell him, we just asked him we were asking about varnishing, if he actually needed to varnish an icon. And he was saying, no, you don't, because what happens is when the proteins in the fat in the egg actually creates these really strong bonds between the pigments. So it's these really strong chemical bonds that are happening. And that's what saves it, not that it gets encapsulated. But anyway, but also too, it's like, I just for Christmas I got somebody, I think it was my parents, offered some money, and so I just purchased this book. Finley is her name, and it's on the history of colors. And so it actually sort of goes into most of the major colors like icon painters would use, and just talks about like how they're created and the sort of history behind them. I could hear him talking about it to some people at the retreat, and so I was intrigued by it. So, but it's like a lot of the pigments are from crushed stone. Yellow ochre is just right from the earth; it's just clay. Some of the blacks are made from like bones, they're charred bones, so it's actually really physical. But listening to Father Damien sort of talk about the process, he's been painting for about 30 years, but it's like he's almost like in love with all of everything about the icon. It's like his brushes, mean something to him. He knows the history of the brushes, and he knows where the paints came from, or he actually even made the pigments himself, and knew where he maybe even collected the clay or collected the rocks, and so it's a real, just a real beauty of knowing everything about the product and knowing it's all natural. So that was a really beautiful aspect of it. But then, Ajahn Jotipalo and I did an icon workshop 2 years ago, and we just went over and stayed there for the week, and we just decided to do a traditional Christian icon, and go back here to icons. This is Father Damien. Was everybody here for the 20th anniversary? Anybody here not for the 20th anniversary? Yeah, so he came and gave a talk. I might play a little bit of, if I speed up here and get enough information in, but he came and gave a short talk, and I love this too. I'll show you the next slide. Them Ajahn Jotipalo leading them over to the reception hall for the 20th. But you see the way Father Damien's, he's actually holding an icon. He's just like, he's loving that icon, It's just like he's really protecting it. And I don't think he let it out of his hands the entire time he was here. He always had a hold of it. And I'll play you the little clip about it on the YouTube video that is actually posted on their website as well. Actually, I'll just do that right now so I don't forget. It's worth it. I'm going to jump ahead.
And Abhayagiri means fearless mountain, the place where we overcome anything that would keep us from living in faith. Fear, as I understand it, would be the opposite of faith. And that we share this mountain together is for me a profound statement of friendship. We don't have to agree on everything. But we can walk together, and sometimes we do. We had a recent project, thanks to the good efforts of the monks here inspiring that, and Ajahn Jotipalo. He said that I wasn't to use his name too often. He came to a church service at our monastery, and I referred to him, I think, 3 times. And he thought that was a little too much. So in all humility, I'm just going to refer to him once here as windows into... and so he used a phrase that he translated into English from... I'm afraid all of our faces... but he just couldn't understand why they had to be here. And so he used a phrase that he translated into English from Flemish, and I don't know that it translated well, but it was, it's not good to have 2 roosters on the same dung heap. I'm afraid all of our faces turn various colors, and I thought at that point the dialogue between the Christian and the Buddhist monks was over, but somehow the humility of my Buddhist brothers and their kindness was not to be undone. And we continue to try to work together. And I brought an icon today. In our tradition, we use icons as windows into eternal spaces. But it's an icon that was given to us 20 years ago by the monks of Abhayagiri. And it's just a simple icon of a woman holding a child we call the Mother of God and the Christ child. But as you see, it's in the shrine of a Thai Buddhist shrine. I don't know what this is exactly referred to as the shrine, but for me, it's an icon that is the first icon that you greet when you come into our little chapel. And 20 years ago, when they brought this to us, I felt that this would be a window for us to remind us of, we oftentimes think of the eternal kingdom. Jesus refers to the kingdom of God being at hand among us and within us. and that if we look carefully, and if we open up our eyes wide enough, we may be able to see that garden, that place of communion with the divine even now. And Abhayagiri and the monks of Abhayagiri and even some of their friends have helped us to open up our eyes. And so we want to thank Ajahn Jotipalo, all of the venerable monks here who we are so honored to be with, and all of you to be our friends. We thank you. And we're going to just end with a little song because Ukrainians have to sing a song, and then you'd probably throw us out afterwards, but I'll go stand over there.
You would kick him out, we'd let you hear that. So, you know, we're recording that. You can see he's got just a really extremely nice sense of humor, and I was just over there, say this week, to learn how to make the boards, and I wanted to make a video of actually how you make the emulsion for the egg, and so he agreed to let me do that. It took us 4 tries to get it because we kept breaking into jokes, and so I just go the very first one. I'll play the second one first. I'll just play the first bit, and yeah. I don't know. I'll just play the first one, but it's only like 4 seconds long. You'll see his sense of humor and stuff. But basically, we tried it before, and he didn't realize I was filming it, and so he got all flustered and started laughing, and so I had to film it again. And then he started talking before I got the camera going, so I sort of said, "Wait," and then you'll hear his comment out. I just think I could just play this as a loop all day, so I think it's lovely.
A going to show A. Oh, for heaven's sakes. A going to show A. Oh, for heaven's sakes.
I just found that hilarious. In the abbot of the monastery. Oh, for heaven's sake.
Is this what gesso is? Is gesso the
Yeah.
egg?
Well, the gesso, no, that's the medium that you paint. Gesso is it's a rabbit skin glue with like a marble powder into it. So like have you seen the board of that garden? That's the white substance on there. So that's just a glue and any kind of white.
Because that's been used for
thousands of years. Yeah, thousands of years. Yeah. And he said these paintings will they'll last for 8,000 years. Probably like the Egyptians used a very similar process as well. And we were at the pigment manufacturer in Willits, and I'm sure he makes this kind of joke, but I told the man there, I don't know if I want my paintings lasting 1,000 years, and I'll wait till I'm good enough. And he goes no. He goes like what art historians know now is because someone did take the time to put it on, and they weren't always the best artwork. Sometimes it was junk, but they can learn a lot about the culture, the process, where the pigments came from. They can do all these sort of DNA, keeps the tradition alive. So that kind of inspired me, like, okay, well maybe I'll start doing a few in egg, because I even up to last week, actually just 3 nights ago was the first time I actually started doing the egg tempera on my own. So I kind of, I gave the morning reflection the next morning that I was really scared. Because literally for 10 years I've been using the same pigments, and I'll show you a painting of what I did just after coming back from the workshop. And that workshop just 3 weeks ago completely changed the way I see. I can try to explain to you what happened, but yeah, something shifted, and so I was able to see things in a completely different way. But it was because of 10 years of practice that happened, and putting myself in a situation where I could learn or be with somebody who's a skilled teacher, and then something happened. And so I started painting with the fabric paints, and I was like, wow, I can't believe I did that. And then so I decided to start working with the egg. And it's funny because like the first 2 days I was like, I think I made a mistake. I think I should go back to my comfort zone. But last night I finished my first icon, and I'll show it to you. And I was pleasantly surprised. Pat myself on the back there, but go back to the photos, paintings, icons. So I'll show you this one here. This is Father Damien's, so don't get too excited yet. And so this was interesting because the first time I went over with Tonkovilo, you had the option doing this one or the mirror image of this. This was Archangel Gabriel, and the mirror image is Michael. And so think Kovilo did Michael, and I did this one, Gabriel. And it's really, I love the whole process too, because like when you start off, I have an example like right here. I won't show you the finished product, but you have it's like a drawing that you want to work from. So I'm working with this kind of a picture of Ajahn Chah, and this is, somebody was telling me recently, I think it was Tonkin Danya was saying that they have evidence that 1,000 years ago when icons were doing it, they were still using very similar techniques. So transferring from paper is not cheating. It's actually and I worked with some professional artists in New York City and when I was in college, and they would project their image up onto a wall and trace it and stuff like that. So it's not, don't think of it as cheating if you want to try doing some stuff. It's actually what the professionals do. And then you transfer the image onto a board. And then with icons, which I really like, is you actually scratch the image into the board. So you get can you pass that around? And so you get the image kind of onto the board. And what's beautiful about that is like when I was using the fabric shrinks and stretches and does all sorts of things. So half of my paintings that didn't really kind of look like Ajahn Chah was my fault, but the other half was the fact that the fabric shifted, and so that's why I wasn't so worried about what the image looked like. I was just trying to learn how the paint worked, and I knew that. But with this, you have 100% solid, 99.9% solid surface, and you've actually scratched it in. So if you do start to kind of wander off the image, you can actually see exactly where you should go back to, and it makes it easier to come back to it. But when you start off with the scratched image, and then you actually put a prayer into the icon. You actually, if you want it to be a healing icon, if you want to give it to somebody, if it's going to a particular church or a friend, you actually put your intentions into the painting. And I thought this was Father Damien's sense of humor, but it's not. But the very first coat you put is just a sort of wash. And what it's intended to do is to give a base color, because some of the pigments will absorb at different rates, and so not to get this kind of molded effect, you put this wash down, and it's called chaos. So you start with chaos, and that's where you're putting your prayers into the chaos, and you put it down, and then you start with the absolute darkest color first, and you work from the dark to the light. So out of the darkness comes the vision, comes the image, and so even just that whole imagery and the process of it. And then I started, the last year or so, I've been doing a lot more reading about icons. And, like, you look at this, you could think, oh, that's kind of naive. It's like this doe-eyed, sort of big eyes and dilated eyes and stuff like that. And so I was asking Father Damien about that. And he goes, no, the imagery that you're seeing there is that this is Gabriel, and he's coming from heaven into our world. So he's like coming from the light of heaven into the darkness of our world. It's like, we're coming to an icon in prayer. We have dukkha. We're looking for solutions out. So this is kind of a visual imagery of someone coming into the darkness. And so if you're coming from the light, their eyes are going to dilate. So it's giving you all these little visual cues like that there's something happening. And also too with icons, they're never about they're not trying to express anything. Like you would never see this Jesus who's giving you the thumbs up and smiling, and or even crying on the cross. It's all about, actually everything about the icon is about stillness. That's what it's really, the primary thing is, it's trying to bring you into the presence. Like you said, it's like a window into divine, into something spiritual. And so it's usually quiet. You usually will know the story, or know the person, know the qualities of that person. You're coming to it in prayer, and so there's lots of different elements I could get into with the icon maybe later. But so this is the one that I was. The first time we did it, we were just copying his work, and that's usually what an icon painter will do. They'll just they can have some creativity in what they're doing, but basically the whole lexicon of what images you paint, and like Michael or Gabriel's always got a red, so it's like you can almost look at any painting. It's like if it's an archangel and he's wearing red, that's Gabriel. If it's blue, then it's Michael. The various saints, like some of them are bald, they're always painted bald, so that's Peter. And so there's certain imagery that they have that's sort of canonized. And so one of it is just really free. It's like when you sat down to paint. You didn't have to. You didn't have to think too much. It was just sort of just more prayer and silence for yourself. Just trying to copy what you're seeing, and putting your intentions into it. And at this particular icon workshop, I think there were about 10 of us, and there were 2 people there that had done many icons, almost like professionals, and then there were like myself and Kovilo, who were had some artistic not training, but we felt comfortable with it. There were 1 or 2 that looked like they probably had some talent, but they're just trying it for the first time. And there was 2 people there that couldn't draw a straight line, even with a ruler. And all 10 of our icons came out beautiful. And that was a real powerful imagery for me. It's just like with the precepts or with the training, like you just put yourself into it, you're going to get the results. It is a process. It has been thought out, and so this was the image that I was copying, and this is the image that I did. And the difference in colors, probably because of the varnishing, but obviously you can tell his lines are a little straighter, a little, like I noticed like around the nose and the lips, like, and I'm not sure if that's just because of the different lighting of the picture, but you can see he's got a lot more red in his lips and a little more richer color. But and I think I did a few things definitely different background. But it was funny when I did this icon. I came back and I was showing it to everybody, and A for Archangel and G for Gabriel. I think he has like I'm not sure what language, if it's Greek, but he's got the letters there. So I thought I'll do something in English. And so I brought this back, and everyone kept saying, "Is that Ajahn Amaro?" And I was like, "What are you talking about, Ajahn Amaro?" And it's like, yeah. And so I literally it seemed like everybody kept asking me that. So I was like, that's really weird. So I sent it to Ajahn Amaro. This is what he sent me back. Isn't that amazing? So I think he wrote back and he said Gabriel's nose needs to be a little longer and he could use some sideburns. So the job well done. So at the same time, though, I started, Jeff and Rita invited me to go down to Sebastopol to see Tashi, I think is his name, is a Tibetan artist. Here we are in front of his icon, or his Tonka painting. And so this was like 2 years ago, and then this was last year. You can see he's done a lot more work in it. And then we took Ajahn Liam there last year. And but it was kind of amazing. It was very similar. Almost everything's like exactly mixed pigments that he was grinding, and very similar techniques. And that he had me working with tracing paper just to do an icon. He does these like every Sunday, I think it is. You can go, and I think it's like $25 or so, and he'll just lead you through from 101 to doing. Some of the students there who were doing really professional paintings, like the size of this painting, but all the clouds and devas and things in them, and so I just wanted to go, just kind of get some confirmation of what I was doing, or just get some insights, and it was great when I was talking to Tashi, like just standing in front of this image. I was just blown away just by the energy from it, and I just felt extremely happy just being in front of this. And he said it's going to take him 5 years to paint it, so he's probably about 4 years into it now. And he was given the mission by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He'd been a monk with him for 9 years to preserve Tibetan art, the tradition of it, not necessarily preserving pieces of art, but the technique of painting. And so his idea was to have a studio for 5 years, and people could come and participate and watch him doing it. And then I think he said, he hoped to be able to travel around the world taking this. He can roll it up and take it and give lectures about it, or about the artwork and the form. And I was here, I said, what do you see when you look at this? What do you see when you look at it? He without hardly a second thought, he just said, fear. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, I've only been working on this a year, and I can see how attached I am to it. He said, people come in here, it's a studio, people with their Starbucks, someone could spill it on it, or a crazy person could come in and slash it open, and he says, I'm attached to it now. He says, what am I going to feel like in 5 years? I was really impressed with that answer. And then the other thing, though, he said is, because we were talking about in the Christian tradition, they believe there's sort of like 3 different ways that you can actually come into communion with the divine. sort of ways that you can, come into spiritual understanding. One of it's through written text or listening to Dhamma talks or, reading Dhamma books. That's one way. The other is through the music. Obviously the Christian, we'll play some maybe later in the second half. Christian, music or chanting. I played the other day some of the Dhammapada being chanted, and a lot of people, I was surprised how many people actually made comments about that. I was really inspired by that. Actually, I'm not surprised, but so through chanting and music, it can stir the heart. But in the Christian tradition, they really believe that you can come to enlightenment through icons. It's a form of prayer, and it's interesting. It's a form of prayer for the icon painter, as well as for the person coming to it. There's a way of actually coming to an icon in prayer, and so they really believe that the icon has that ability to teach. And so Tashi said the exact same thing. And there's I think it's like this, not celestial season, but there's this really big coffee table books of Tibetan imagery. And he was really angry about that because the images on the back are actually reversed. It's the wrong, the image is wrong. And that's his whole mission in life, is to, sort of preserve the traditional art. And they're just sort of they probably weren't intentionally being disrespectful, but to him it was really gross. And but he said his fear was that he could paint, like the saint should be, Abhayagiri mudra is this, not this. And so he really thinks that the painting can enlighten you, and if he paints anything wrong, it'd be like giving a Dhamma talk but saying, there's 5 noble truths, and start teaching something wrong. So that I had a little harder time because I was being a little bit more. I don't have any pictures here of it, but I was doing some paintings of White Tara, and he was pointing out a few things that I didn't include in there. White Tara typically has 7 eyes. She has one in her forehead, besides the 2, and then one in the palm of each of her palms and on her soles of her feet. And I just couldn't bring myself to paint those in there. And he was like, "No, she's got 7 eyes. You have to do that." And so I was, kind of did a little bit with this. And this is the image behind me right here. And this is just coming back last week. This is a kind of an obscure photograph of Ajahn. This I can tell, like the canvas, shrunk a little bit, but this is definitely done in the icon style, where you're painting from the dark canvas and then doing lighter and lighter colors, building up until you get this kind of image, 3-dimensional. And I was shocked actually when I did this painting. I was like, wow, where'd that come from? And just saying, it's like thing it comes is, it did take 10 years, it was like studying the paints and putting in the process and putting in the time. So, but this, literally a month ago, I could never have ever done this. I would have tried to have painted it in a different way. I would have tried to just paint with the colors that are on the surface, not seeing the paintings in the background. It was interesting, like something happened. I was telling Reverend Hung Shur about it when I was doing the icon workshop. I'll pass this around too. But Sakula, she's the teacher up at the Portland Friends of the Dhamma. And she actually learned icon painting from Ajahn Sumedho's sister, who lives just across the river in Fort Vancouver. And she's extremely skilled. I think she's like known all over the country as an icon painter. So she learned, but Virginia is her name, and she said she would teach Sakula, but Sakula had to do Buddha images because she knew that she was a Buddhist. So she had to come up with her own imagery. And I've had this I think Sakula gave this to us when 10, 15 years ago. And I've always appreciated it, just the line work, and this is really awesome. And I just like the way the colors sort of bleed through. But I had this next to my painting, the previous one that as I was sitting there. And when I was there this time, I said I really wasn't worried about what the image came out. I just really wanted to understand the process of how you mix the paints and what's the order. And every single time someone had a question, I found myself like drifting over to listen to Father Damien's answer, because it's like everybody's question became my question. It was really kind of this really interesting process, just wanting to learn. And but I had this icon right next to my painting, and about halfway through the icon workshop, I looked down and I saw this completely 3-dimensional. And I really believe, like looking at the final the final 2 or 3 layers of paint that she did, I could actually probably tell you pretty accurately what was the order of brush stroke she put down. I could literally see it like 3-dimensionally. Like something shifted in my consciousness. And I didn't try to do that. It was just sort of putting myself into the process, trying to understand it without forcing it, but just, putting yourself in the situation where you're with a teacher, you're doing the work, you're, paying attention, you have the question. That's what contemplation is, just having a question. But then just look down, boom, he was there. And I told it to Reverend Hung Sure, and he's like, yeah, of course it worked that way. You pass that around. So when I came back, it's like something definitely had shifted in the way I saw pictures and paint. I did a whole bunch of, first just a bunch of line drawings, ink washes with the paints I was doing, and they were looking 3-dimensional, just even doing black and white. And so I thought I better start doing this in color. And this was the first one. I did 3, and then just decided, okay, well, I better start painting in the egg tempera, because I did this workshop. I don't want to forget what I was learning. And so I just did this last night. It doesn't totally look like Ajahn Chah, but that's all right. But that's the first. And it's interesting, I was telling Beth, it's like, I have been working for like 10 years with those other paints. And I was looking at this painting, and it's just like, sometimes I think as an artist or just anybody who's trying to accomplish something, sometimes you have a vision of what you're trying to do. Like you have a gut feeling of what it is you want to do. It's either a piece of music, or you can just faintly hear it in the background, but you don't quite know what it's saying. Or you see a picture in the back of your head, but it's just kind of blurry. This is the picture that I've seen in my head for 10 years. And it's like, this is and I can see how I can improve it, or how I can get it to even closer to what I have this vision in my head. But it's like, oh, that was it. It was really funny. It was like an epiphany moment, like, aha, okay, you're on the right track.
It looks a little like you.
Well, when I was doing my original paintings, at one point I asked Ajahn Pasano, I said, what actually color was Ajahn Chah? Because he keeps showing up in my paintings as being a Caucasian. So yeah, we do have a tendency to do that. And then this was, I finished this yesterday afternoon when I should have been preparing for this class. I finished it, but this is what it looked like the day before. So you can see the whole process of you start with, actually I didn't do it totally, but like this outer color here, you'd actually paint like the entire image with that. And then you come in with this kind of brighter orange for all the kind of highlight areas. And then you come in with, I think that's red ochre and some kind of green. This is a really bright orange with the yellow ochre. And this is almost pure yellow ochre. And I like the way that the little bits of the bright orange are coming through. And then once you get really skilled, then you start using like the really bright kind of reds and orange coming through in certain areas, like where the light is. But then in other areas, you'd be using more greens to cool it down, so you get this 3-dimensional effect of it. And but also too, it's like I'll go back, showing you. No, go forward. Okay. One thing also too, what we were talking about, sort of one of the funnest conversations I had with Father Damien was I took this image over to show him what I wanted to do, and the kind of the almond-shaped halo behind Ajahn Chah. He looked at me and goes, "Is that a mandorla?" And I was like, or he said, "Is that a mandala?" And I was like, "No, that's not actually what a mandala is." I said, "Why do you ask?" He said, "Well, there's that shape in the icon is called a mandorla." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" He said, "Well, it's a window into the universe." And so you'll see these pictures of Christ. He's usually kind of sitting. Let's see. No, it's not in this image. These are icons that Father Damien did. Usually I could be sitting, and there'll be a kind of the almond shape behind him. It'll kind of be like light sort of coming behind him, almost like the universe. It's like a window into the universe. And I was like, well, that's really interesting, because like this image, well, what a mandala is, the way Ajahn Amar always described it was, we went to go see Robert Thurman give a talk on mandalas in the early days. I think I was in Anagarika. He was down in Berkeley. And he was saying that a mandala, which you usually see, is looks like a, it's a 4-dimension. It's like a bird's eye view of like a shrine or a temple. And he said they're actually a real mandala is a 3-dimensional representation of the universe. But what you're seeing is a bird's eye view of it, and so it's usually they'll be like almost like the Native American colors, the white, red, black, and red, and this kind of geometric shapes. And you'll see the Tibetan monks making sand mandalas with them, and quite large. And what Robert Thurman is saying is that's a bird's eye view of that temple, of the universe. But if you come off center, everything is then out of symmetry. So everything sort of becomes chaotic. But it's only when you're centered, so it's like being centered in meditation, centered in prayer, everything makes sense when you're like proper perspective of everything being in symmetry. And so we start talking, and then there's a whole bunch of things that you do in icons, like let's see, that's just here. It's called like say reverse perspective or inverse perspective. So like normally what I describe is like normal perspective is this one right here. So like if you're looking at a fence post in a landscape painting, the post closest to you is really large and they're smaller in the background. And what that does is it actually pulls you into the painting. So like, there's some familiarity, but your vision actually goes to the horizon line, and so it pulls you into the canvas. But then in reverse perspective, the object is bigger in the back than it is in the front. And so I was describing my understanding of this to Father Damien. I said, so in an icon, Christian icon, they paint with this multiple different types of perspective, but this sort of reverse perspective is very common. In that picture of the Bible there, this is an example of like what it would look like. The front page, the closest, is the smallest page, and the back page is the biggest. So there's all these sort of visual things happening. Like you might look at a picture of a cross, and you'd only normally see 3 sides of it, but you might see 4 or 5 from a Christian perspective, and the icon perspective. And what that does is the vanishing point is you. You're the vanishing point. And I told it to Father Damien. He just burst out laughing. He goes, "Oh, that's such a Buddhist way of seeing it." He goes, "No, it's not that you don't exist." He says, "But it's the perspective is pointing at you." Or if the icon is painted in a certain way, the vanishing point becomes behind you. And he said that actually includes you into the painting. So you're actually in the painting. Okay, I like mine that you don't exist better. That's because I'm a nihilist at heart. But and so. Yeah, there's all these little things that happen inside the icon that I find really fascinating. And yeah, so that's just we'll leave that one on there. So it's about the time I want to take a break, but I wanted to, is there questions or comments, or we can start off with, yeah, go ahead.
What, the layer that's chaos,
Yeah.
what color is that?
They say you can make it any color.
So you just like slap down whatever.
Yeah, it's really watery,
Uh-huh.
and there's a way that you're supposed to put it on these boards here. That here's actually the actual one. That's it didn't quite react exactly. They say you can use egg temper on this, but when I did it, it took an extremely long time for it to dry in. Whereas if you're doing the way the boards that Father Damien made, I was able to paint it in about a minute after doing that. So, but it kind of, there's a way you're supposed to put it on where you're kind of like cooling the water. And then I was reading something about it where you don't actually let your brush touch the canvas, but you load it up with pigment and water and the egg emulsion, and then you kind of pull it. You're actually painting the water. You're pulling the water over it, and it just gives you this. There'll be like no brush stroke in it. It gives you this sort of texture background. When I did this icon here, I kind of, if you come up and look at it, you'll see the area around the Buddha's done in the cooling technique. I hadn't mastered it, but that's what I was just trying to do, is learn. And but it kind of gives you. But it had originally, it was like, it almost looked like marble the way I had painted, and I wanted to leave it that way. Everybody kept saying, "No, don't do that, don't do that." And then I painted, and I was like, "No, I should have left it." But as I said, the whole process being over there was actually my prayer when I went into this. Like I say, you can put prayer. The one I did with the Gabriel was it to be a healing icon for my mom. It was sort of more of a kind of what I wanted it to be. And this one, my prayer was that this would be a teaching icon for me. Something that I'll keep with me, and that hopefully my hope is that I'll continue to learn from it over the years. And so I was selfish in that one. Yeah, John.
You kind of partially answered my question. Anytime you get involved in a creative process, there's the element of attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I deal with that with music, a lot. And setting aside, things I can blatantly and make a living, like when I'm working on soundscapes, for example, that really rang true what you said about staying up till 2:30 in the morning. I just did that the other night. I thought it was maybe about 11:30, and I looked at the clock going, because I was finally getting somewhere with this piece, but the only way I can, I try to look at what's the greater good of this, other than just personal, because there's a lot of that in any art, I used to think that all the music was just kind of a form of navel staring, staring in a way, and then somebody one day came in the room and they said, I feel so much better. I came in here all depressed and I just listened to this music and I feel so much better. And I thought, well, I guess there is a socially beneficial part, but I just never paid that much attention to, really.
Yeah.
And so with the stuff I do now, the kind of thing I see is that I hope it opens up people to the whole world of sound all the time around them. Because I use a lot of that, just conversations or random field recordings, and they gather in different ways. And some people have said that, they say, well, I never heard that when I was there before, and now I'm listening more closely. So I don't know how you deal with that, because it's bound up in it. You get attached to these things, and they can even fall into kind of an obsessive, kind of compulsive kind of behavior, where you do disregard the clock, and then the next day, I've got to do this stuff, I didn't get enough sleep, and So I'm wondering if I like what you just said about how you set a purpose kind of for your work.
Yeah. So when I first started doing it, Ajahn Jotipalo might remember this conversation differently, but I remember him encouraging me to to explore kind of work, because I could see immediately. It's like, yeah, well, like before, I used to meditate like this in the morning, and now I meditate like this. I'm usually wide awake in the morning, and yeah, my mind is present, and yeah, enjoy meditation now. Where before I was, not that I didn't enjoy it, but I was usually asleep, and so I noticed that it's a huge difference right away, just that the energy levels there, but. Initially, when I first started, like that, the second time after I did the Native American paintings, I would start painting, and I would look over, and it would be 2 in the morning, and I was like, oh, I got to get up in 2 hours. But usually, even that would be enough, though. It'd be like that'd be enough sleep for periods. Like I can do it for about a week, but then I might crash during we have the one pra. The next day, it's might sleep quite a bit on the next day. But then that was causing problems with my back if I was sleeping too much at one time. So I started having health problems, and I actually broke my finger just being a little too tired one day when I was working, and so there's some health hazards to being an artist, and so I had to be careful with that. But so what I started doing, I love this, but I started setting an alarm so I would go to sleep, and I'd set it like, okay, I have to be in bed by 11:30, so I could set the alarm for 11:15 so I could clean up, or I'd actually set an alarm to go to sleep. But as you probably know too, when you're being in the creative mode, it's like. The energy's flowing, and then you set. Even though you lay down, you still may not fall asleep for 2 hours. But still, I think just that laying down that does give me enough. You do get rest, and the mind quiets. But so I didn't need it. But I set some parameters. So it's like one thing is I decided I made a pact with Ajahn Jotipalo that I would continue doing this as long as I could fulfill all of my duties to the monastery. So like if I started missing morning pujas, or I started, sort of like not coming to the business meetings or stuff like that, and as long as I was able to do everything that's required of everybody here, then I would can do it. It was funny because I made that the determination, that part of me, the determination, And the very next week, the senior monks, we have a tea about every 2 weeks just to get together, just to check in with each other, just kind of more social. But I missed it. It had nothing to do with art, though. I was like, I just totally forgot that. I was like, I think I was out doing walking meditation, and then I came down. I was like, oh shoot, today was that. And Ajahn was like, yeah, okay, you know. So first commitment after that. But yeah, so I do, yeah, kind of aware of that. And fortunately with me, like I'm not trying to do it to make money or anything like that. So it's like the attachments aren't there that much. And totally my intention is, it's interesting, like this last 2 or 3 weeks of, you know, something's shifted, and I get really excited myself about like, oh wow, things are actually starting to work. And so I think all the monks here are like totally sick of me sort of, look at what I did last night, look what I did last night. You know, so there's this sort of, you know, sort of manic sort of, you know, but totally it's like, I was questioning it the last couple of days, and it's just like, to me it's just like, you know, it's not actually for praise, it's just like, I did something I thought was really amazing. It's almost like mudita, like I want to share, like, look at this. But I do understand a lot of people like could care less, and that's fine. But you know, I know it's in my own world, but yeah, part of it is to be able to share. And so, but I kind of been reflecting on that too. Like, you know, Father Damien, like he painted all these paintings, and they're just absolutely spectacular. But maybe he did. I'll have to ask him. Like when he first started painting, did he go around and start showing everybody? But you know, you go in there and he'll show you the church and show you the paintings and talk about the symbology. But he'll never tell you that he's the one that painted them. If you ask him, he'll admit it. But look what I did. I did this. You know, he doesn't do that. So the other thing too, I really love about the Christian tradition. I learned this by going over there, as I put yourself into it. Was that, you know, just not only the painting of it is the process, but like you see in this picture right here, like, you know, these icons right here, and when you first come into the church, there's one, and that'll be whatever the saint is. That every day they have sort of like a saint or a feast day, or, you know, somebody that the liturgy is going to be about, and they'll have an icon there for them. And so when you first come into the church, like I said, our icon is right there on the wall on the right, just as you come in when we gave him. And there's the icon right in front of you. And you come over and you kiss it. You actually, you know, sort of cross yourself, and then you actually physically kiss the icon. And then, you know, they go and they do their services, and then at certain points, like when there's readings or about the saint, one of the monks will come out with an icon or a painting, and everybody goes up and kisses the icon. In the previous picture, I took it specifically, like, you know, there's, which I did today intentionally. They have candles. You like, that's like the proper way of viewing an icon is with candles, candlelight, and but they'll light candles in front of various icons at certain times. Cantor will come out and scent, you know, the people there in the church and cant the icons, and, you know, they bow to them, they pray to them, they chant to them. And it's like the service there is like anywhere from 1 to 2 hours, and it's all standing and chanting mainly. A lot of, like you said, Ukrainians can't survive without singing, so they do a lot of singing and praising. And it's not like a kind of like a evangelical church, but there's a lot of that. But I realize like the whole service is about the icon. It really is, and that really impressed me. Like you wouldn't get that just by looking at the pictures in a book or even maybe hearing someone talk about it. But when you go there, it's like it's so yeah, you smell it, you taste it, you see it, you hear it. So it's really, yeah, kind of, which will be a perfect segue into our second session, which is kind of hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, smelling the artwork in our daily life. So yeah, Neil.
I assume that's Jesus. It looks to me like he's got some kind of mudra going.
Yeah, I was curious about
On his hand. Yeah, well, there's something the ICXC. There's something about the way it's like he's you see, here's the I, there's the X, and there's the C, and, you know, so
Do you know what that represents?
in the Hebrew, or it's supposed to mean like I am the way, which I don't know if we have a picture. I am, yeah. So, but it's yeah, it is actually him. It is a mudra. That's something a lot of mudras on. Like we were asking Father Damien yesterday about there's a painting outside the icon workshop area, and it's like the Virgin Mary, and she's holding a towel, And he says, oh, that's, our mother, Guadalupe, or well, that wasn't who it was. It's Guadalupe days today. But he said, you can always tell that's her, because she's the only icon of the Virgin Mary is carrying a towel. So they have lexicons like the Tibetans do. Each thing is a different thing. That's different than this in terms of our icons. Means different things. Any other questions? Or can we We can start with questions too, like during the break. I think things this is mainly what I wanted to cover about. And anything else is kind of, I've got a whole bunch of things prepared. I'll show you just real quick, and you can think about it during the break. But I want to show you this bowl stand tutorial. Show you maybe a little thing about sewing robes, being really creative with that. Ajahn Jotipalo and a bunch of the community members made the shrine. You might want to just, if you have just during the break, go over into the new building and look at the Buddha image. And it's probably really dusty, but you can see the shrine that was lovingly made here. Is it covered? Okay, you can lift up the cover. Yeah, it probably is because they're going to be sprayed. Yeah, so don't move any of the. Probably don't look at the shrine. Next time you come back, you'll get to admire it. But there's some things there, and we can talk about anything. I know there's musicians here, there's potters here, there's writers here. So anything we want to talk about this afternoon, we can. Second session. So it's just 10 minutes to 3. So maybe we'll come back at 3. 10 minutes. Don't fly away. How many people are viewing?
7, 6.
No, any questions?
Oh, actually, a lot.
We'll also set these paintings that I did that I've shown you. I'll just have them back there on the back if anybody wants to look at them.
Yeah.
Can I see those files? Computers and you can see it?
Let's see. You probably need to check with Ajahn
It
Jotipalo.
reminds me of college when I was a student and lived in Jotipalo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I like a lot more than I
Oh,
knew.
I see.
I thought it was okay by definition.
Yeah, our servers is
Okay. So some people want to see the pictures a little bit up closer. Right now,
We had to do the ceremony. The second one I attended, I did a sweat lodge with Native Americans. And so I'm so happy that we have the Buddhist temples here in our area that I could come view it. Will there be any meditation today?
Yes, very good. We'll take 15 minutes.
And is there a time that I can talk to you about the significance of the ceremony and some specific questions that I
Sure,
have?
yeah. You can just take it right after.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
What's your name?
Sarah,
Sarah. I'm Jotipālo.
Jyoti,
Jyoti.
nice to meet you.
These were expensive too, but they're warranty for a long time, but these strong.
That means you have to go.
Well, I can use drugstore.
Is it rapid scan canvas and then how many layers and the back is sanded gesso.
John, did you see me make sound schools? Professionally, and do you
Well, no, that's,
just a hobby?
well, it's a hobby, but, I'm assembling an album to, hopefully the benefit, Center for Marine Science, so they're to have some proceeds to them. that's, I use that for the field day parties. Yeah, yeah. And I choose that one, and it's actually very.
Is Jeff reading?
Yeah.
I think Jeff is the one.
Hold on, make sure. Sure. Playing piano. Is it fair for you to give me the, I was going to ask, Ajahn Jotipalo, but then he walked out, so can you give me that password, or is that?
I don't have it.
You don't have it, oh, you don't need it for all this, because you guys have it right on the computer.
He said, I never got.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm not gonna be able to stay, because I'll have to get it right up, so
Oh.
I might as well go now. Let's see. And these, you put all these days somewhere on the website too, or they record?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I always miss the ends. You know.
Yeah, so you should be able to check in recording.
What do you do when people meditate? You turn it off. You don't.
Some part of it, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah.
Well, right now I'm trying to figure out what to do.
See, did you find the files you needed to copy?
Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm gonna stick it in here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you'll have to come over to the computer there to copy it.
Okay. Maybe I should disable the streaming support.
You stop the stream, it's gonna stop.
Should I stop streaming?
Oh, there he is.
Leave it on. Okay. How do we blank out the screen during the break?
Oh, I can show you how to do that.
Must be a.
There's
a
one.
program.
Yeah, but I didn't wanna make it too complicated, but yeah, there's ways to do it.
Well, right now, here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, somebody wanted to see the pictures and so on. And then this, after the projection, is sometimes it's really bright. So
Okay.
I was trying to add like another, like window, broadcast window, so that we can add another source. I don't know what one we use yet. So we do window capture source or. Okay, trying to show the pictures.
There's an icon.
I think it might be just turn on the bottom. Maybe I should just.
That's still gonna be kind of
lives before, from beginningless time. Our mistakes have caused much suffering to ourselves and others. We have done wrong, encouraged others to do wrong, and given our consent to acts of killing, stealing, deceiving, sexual misconduct, and other harmful actions among the 10 unwholesome deeds. Whether our faults are known to others, or whether they are hidden, they have brought us to the realms of hell, hungry ghosts and animals, causing us to be born in places filled with pain and suffering. We have not yet had the chance to realize our full potential. Today we are determined with one pointed concentration to repent the obstacles of our past unwholesome actions. Blessed Ones, be our witness, and look upon us with compassion. We surrender before you and make this aspiration. If at all within this very life and countless lives before, we have given, even if only a handful of food or simple garment,
We can come back to that later if we want to. This is my favorite chant. This is so you can see if they're from Plum Village, yeah, this is a really, really beautiful chant. But before we go into anything else, did anybody think of anything during the break or want to share anything?
Very moved by your icon of Ajahn Shah, the cast round. How his eyes, there was a direct connection with the viewer, and yet there was also this kind of otherworldly aspect at the same time. It was very arresting.
So I better stop now on that. Yeah, because there's something about just the whole style of icon that, I'm just starting to learn it myself. But, yeah, I feel, when I do painting, it's like, the images that I've seen, this actually looks like, what I've been looking at, and stuff like that. To me, it's hard to explain. Like I've mentioned, several people here, I don't think they get it, but it's like, I didn't paint this. Does that make sense to anybody? I did not paint this. It's like, this is a style, this is a tradition. It's like, maybe I put the work into it, or I've come to understand it. But it's just like, it's just that same thing with the icon workshop I did 2 years ago. All 10 of us are the same icon. They're all beautiful. It's just like, and I think there's something to me that's really powerful about that. It is a tradition. Well, it was interesting because like when I was doing this one, when I left, I had a really bad headache at the end of doing it, because partly because I was trying to soak in so much information, trying to get it. It was good at one sense, but it was a little bit too much at the other end. But it was difficult because I was creating something completely. It's like I had been for all those years and did the backup work, but I was trying to make something look fairly nice, but really trying to understand the process. but because everybody else was basically just copying something, it's like they really could just sort of drop their minds and go into prayer and do it. Whereas, but I was trying to do something creative and do something different. It was like, I was using a different part of the brain than everybody else was, and so it was kind of felt a little bit out of whack with everybody else. But it wasn't bad, but it was just.
Well, apropos of that, I'm wondering if those two aspects ever kind of come together,
Mm-hmm.
so that, because I've heard artists talk about when they're not, artists who aren't necessarily working in a form, talk about that they're not doing the art.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like there might be a conversion point where, one puts in the practice within the form and the discipline,
Mm-hmm.
and lets go of the, like, it's me doing it, and then something happens that's different and unique.
One way I describe that is like for a musician, you have to play the scales. Some people just say, well, I just want to be a jazz musician. I just want to just play whatever I want to play. And it is. It's fun. It's cool. It might even sound good, but they haven't really mastered the instrument. And so it's like someone who actually has learned how to play the scale or has learned to play Mozart, as it is. But then once they actually master the instrument or the scale, then when they actually play Mozart, it's actually through the Mozart that the real creativity comes out. Like when you hear a real virtuoso, playing something, it's complete. You might know that piece of music yourself really well, but then something magical comes out when someone's really knows it, and they're not doing that. That's where I see that happening. And Ajahn Sona, because I was hoping to bring his name into this. He was a classically trained musician, playing for the London or the Toronto Symphony. And there's a Tea Time with Sona. There's all these YouTube. I think it's maybe from a tape in like 12, 15 years ago of him, and he's describing what it was like for him being a musician. And he's describing, it's just like Father Damien, just being in love with all of his pigments and his brushes and his canvases, and Ajahn Sona is describing like he just loved his case, that his instrument came in. And he described, just like lifting up the latches and hearing the click click, just that sound would just that click would just excite him. I can hear that click, opening the case and then seeing the dark red mahogany of his cello or whatever he was playing, and then picking it up, and it's just the weight of it, and everything about it, it was like almost this it was a very sensual experience of playing the instrument, holding it and caressing it and singing with it, and he said, like for him, there's a posture that everybody has to sit in when you're playing your instrument, if you're playing it well. And he said the thing is, like, you can, if you're a musician and playing an instrument, like the posture's there so you can play long pieces, not have to move, and then you can totally just absorb into the music, and you're not even aware that you're even playing the instrument. You're just responding, and what will happen is that at the end of this performance, like 2-hour performance, all of a sudden you pop into your body and your body's in extreme pain. But the whole time you were doing it, you had no idea. And he did that, and he goes, watch this, and he goes, and his whole arm, just all the bones just started cracking. Because he said, just holding his arm in one particular way, it's kind of deformed his arm a little bit, and he can just do that, and his whole arm cracks, he described that as just totally absorbing into it, and he's not doing anything. He's just Neil.
The way I describe that is that when you are totally in the art, your body is the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
There was no signatures on any of the pieces that he shows. That kind of the whole kind of theme where it's not really who, especially with the icon. You said Father Damien won't even make the point of saying he did it. They'll talk about it. Yeah. And I was kind of been drawn to that thing. Mm-hmm. I spent time in London. I was trying to kill time and went to the National Gallery. And I actually spent most of the time in the older section where it was all Christian iconography. Mm-hmm. And there were no, it was, I'm an artist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The oldest pieces they have, no one knows who did it, but it's the whole tradition and the style.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think one of the paintings does have my name on the back of it. That was, but my mother and I, she did the first couple I did. I had her, or she offered to do the fabric on the outside. She was teaching me how to do it. And in quilting, I guess that's a big thing, is you actually do sort of, write your name where it was painted in the year, or it was quilted and stuff like that. So I did that, but it just not feel right to me. So, but that is part of the most religious art, that you don't sign it, or the art. And also too, it's like there's something about, like, when you're doing the icon, especially like when it's like this part here, it's just scratched in, that say the eyes are already there and stuff like that. So most icon painters take the attitude of you're not coming to the icon is coming to you. Or maybe it's just the opposite, but it's almost like the icon is telling you what it wants to be, how it wants to be painted. And so, like, when I did this last one, I was sitting next to this woman. She did this really beautiful icon, and she'd be like, "Okay, Mary, what do you want?" She kept saying, kept talking to the icon, and responding to it that way, instead of I'm the one painting this painting, putting myself into it, but it's it's more responding to, So I feel like I'm still in the process of trying to this image right here. This image here, like when we were at the icon workshop this last time, I was watching Father Damien. It almost made me depressed, because people would come up and we're all beginners, and the icon was looking kind of wonky and kind of weird, and he would just sort of the tendency is to overpaint it, like you put way too much white into it, and it starts losing that kind of pop feel to it. So I very specifically tried to stay away from white. I just used just the bare minimum on this. Maybe I could have even used more, but I wanted to be on the lighter side. But people come in and it'd be overpainted, and so Father Damien, he had basically the paints all sort of already mixed up, and he'd go in and just 3 brush strokes sort of wipe out the entire painting that they had done, and then go not wiped out, but just so you go in with the darker color, and then take the orange and go in 3 swipes and put it exactly where they needed to be, and then go in with the literally within like 2 minutes or 3 minutes, he'd have the painting looking very close to this. It was inspiring to watch him do it, but at the same time, it was kind of like, God, I'll never be able to do that. That took like 3 or 4 hours or longer, to do that, the final coat painting of it anyway. And but so I mentioned that to him, and he goes, I've been doing this for 30 years. So what we were copying at the workshop was one of his paintings. It was like his painting he did. He knew how to do it, what colors, and so he's really skilled. But so there is something about it. I think back to your question, Jeannie. It's like, I think one area is like kind of meshing the what kind of does intrigue me is not so much now just even the painting of it, but say in the Christian tradition, the icon, they do have this, say the lexicon, the canon of what you paint, what stories from the Bible they tell, or who they're portraying. So I've just been sort of intrigued. Maybe this is somebody else's mission, but it's like, if you're doing a Buddhist icon, it's like this is just kind of learning how to do the form right now, or just doing the face. But like, what stories would you tell from the Buddhist canon? What are the important stories, and how would you tell them? Because there are certain ways that you tell the story in the Christian tradition that sometimes you have to be explained what it is, and that's part of the icon as well. It's like the first time we went to, we actually took Ajahn Punadamo over to Mount Tabor, because he's Ukrainian, and it's a Ukrainian monastery, and we were looking at these icons, and see if you can see any of them. I think like some of these here, they have the brooches here in the hair, and something about that, or I forget what it was, but he was just describing that it was in the time in Rome, or whenever like that particular style was being done, that's what a royal postal carrier would wear, that particular crown. So then, like someone knew if they robbed him that they were going to be executed. So it was kind of like it was a pass to get through. But you knew that they were royal messenger. So in the icon painting, they kind of took that on. It's like, so this is, that's an archangel because it's a messenger because he's got the crown. But it was his way of actually, and I don't think so. Yeah, but he could. Describe. He could explain, about, he could explain that is an archangel and that they are messengers, and that's his way of telling it was by explaining what the icon, what the imagery is of the icon. And so, but I've been kind of intrigued. I haven't started to do any of my own thinking about this yet, and I can see that being a long process. But the other day, 3 or 4 months ago, someone just mentioned a story, and I thought that would be a really interesting icon. It was the story of Rahula coming to the Buddha. The first time he meets him, and his mother Yashoda has asked him to ask for his inheritance, and when he sits down in front of the Buddha, his response is, "Your shadow is pleasing." And I was like, I just love that phrase. Your shadow is pleasing. I was like, ooh, how would you do that as a painting? It just kind of something. I feel my head sort of sparking, as I'm saying that. There's some connections, neurons trying to that are intrigued by that question. I don't know. I don't have any vision at all for it yet, but the question is there. So, but that would be an interesting one to me. But there's so many different stories from the canon. Where would you start? How would you do it? What would they look like? Would you do the reverse perspective? And I started talking about that with the reverse perspective when Father Damien and I were talking about the mandorla. We started talking about it. I don't think either one of us had maybe really ever thought about it, but with the Christian doing things in reverse perspective. And the other thing too about sort of the mandala, it's when you're perfectly on top of it, everything's in symmetry. When you come off of it, everything's, the perspective is warped. So in the mandorla, it's like what I kind of was talking to him about was like, in a Christian icon, the only thing that's actually painted kind of in proper perspective is the saint, is the person that you're sort of coming to or that's coming to you from the painting. They're in proper perspective, but everything, even in their world, is out of perspective. It's kind of chaotic or, doesn't make sense. And so it's like, what I saw from that is like, well, what do we take refuge in? It's like we can't take refuge in the world. We can't, because everything's distorted or out of perspective, so that we take refuge in the Buddha, so it's like that's in proper perspective, and so it's kind of so we were talking about that. I think, oh wow, I don't know if he'd ever thought about that in that way.
That brings to mind a question I've had about you mentioned what the painter does, like putting a prayer in, and then that there's also a way to approach the icon, and it seems like it could be similar with the Buddha Rupa, the icon of the Buddha, that you're maybe in that instance you are contemplating the qualities that are embodied in that story or something. But what do you know about approaching an icon?
It's well, you approach it. Well, part of it is just the way it's painted, and so that actually sort of brings you into it. And it's like I was mentioning here, like in the things, you see the candles, are in front of it, and it's in a. Usually, you'd have we'd recommend like in your house having a particular corner part of your house that's just a shrine. It's not a bookshelf with other things, or put it on a bookshelf. But if you can, just have a proper place for it, and preferably if you have like a zapitan, would be like they'd all be together, and something that's inspiring for you, and images that you like, and that bring that you want to actually be around. And so it's the people that I've met so far that have been in, say, Orthodox, Christian churches, they're usually very committed. So it's like, they have a daily meditation prayer life. And so, it's just that commitment that every day you do it. And I was reading this book, I think his name was Jim Frost. It's called Praying with Icons. It's one of the best books I've read so far. And he describes his situation with his grandmother. And he's like a young boy, and he's sort of, in the same room with his grandmother in the morning. He describes her sort of getting up and sort of cursing, trying to comb her hair and all this stuff, and trying to wake up in the morning. But then she goes over to her icon corner and lights the candles and starts buzzing her prayers. And he just described this really beautiful scene. But he said, what it was about was just like starting her day with silence. It's actually that's like like we get up in the morning, it's like, we're immediately sort of, making the cup of coffee or taking the shower to wake up, or, sort of getting ready for work, or it's just do, all day long. But part of it was with the, like the icon corner that he's describing was this commitment to, very first thing, after you're awake is, to go and start praying. And then, like I say, everything about the icon is supposed to, I understand it, know how to read it. You actually read an icon. It's it's leading you to silence, and that's what the. There's probably other types of icons as well, but that's like the majority of it. So it's, just having like a daily, sort of relationship to it, and coming to it in prayer, and so the same thing, exactly the same thing could happen with our Buddha images and understanding that imagery. And it was funny, when the first time we went over to Mount Tabor, we'll say not first time, but when we went over with Ajahn Punadamo, Father Damien was giving us the explanation of the church, and Ajahn Punadamo was just starting to write his book on the different heaven realms, and he was just finished, but we were talking, and there's these if you go into their church, straight up ahead, there's these stained glass windows, and they're seraphins. And they said all they do is they just praise God. They just sort of surround him and they just sing, just praise. It was interesting when Ajahn Puna was here last time. He was describing the jhana states and how the different heaven realms, like the pictures that Ajahn Chito had done in the beginning. And he said the first realm of devas, they're still connected to the earth in terms of they have thought and they have they actually have been named, so actually named by name in the suttas. But they have thought and evaluation, so it's still kind of attached into the world. But just the next heaven realm up, they're not named, and it says the only thing that's ever said about them is just that they just sing. They're just singing, oh bless, oh bless, oh bless the whole time, and then you go up beyond that, and they're gone, and so I immediately thought of like these seraphins, but there's these suttas though where the Buddha actually goes up into those realms and can talk to Mahabrahma and things like that, and so Ajahn Puna and I were talking about how would you do that as a painting, the Brahma realms, and it was kind of intriguing to me. Yeah, you got a question?
Balaji, he's asking about breaking out of comfort zone. I guess he does some sketching, but he's not comfortable with mixing colors.
Is that Balaji?
Balaji, yeah, Indian guy.
Yeah. How you doing, Balaji? We hear you had an accident.
Well, he can't talk, but yeah, maybe.
Hope you're well. Sad
I see.
But so like I said the other day when you started this painting for the first time, it was amazing how much fear came up when I was doing that, because it was just out of my comfort level. And one thing is just for me is just not just being aware that that's what was there, not necessarily being afraid of it, or actually just by totally acknowledging it, then I didn't have to let it control me or stop me, and so I think you saw some of the other paintings where I explored with just like letting the colors completely dictate what was happening, and just partly it's just like I said, I think the main thing, the thing that saves me is that all I want to do is learn from the paintings. I'm not worried about what they look like. I have that luxury of not having to sell them or to make money off of them or anything. So if they turn out, that's great. That's sort of like icing on the cake. But so my main purpose is how to learn from it. Just pay attention to learn from it, but also to like I notice the benefits of when I then meditate, how there's energy and just feeling good in that way. So it's like there's still some hesitancy to push beyond the boundaries or try something new. I did this painting actually the night I did it. And there's a certain like colors that Father Damien had suggested we use, and he just actually gave me a set of pigments, and so I started painting them, but I realized I'd forgotten the sheet or couldn't find the sheet that what he recommended, so I just sort of made up my own, and started painting it. And I didn't quite get the form right, and it came out okay, but it was kind of flat. And so I took it to Father Damien when I was doing the boards to show it to him. He really liked it. He said, "Oh, that's really neat." And he goes, "What colors did you use?" And I just explained it. He's kind of like, "Really? You use that?" And then, but the form was really good. And like I said, the eyes, I think I had already gotten. So I decided, well, I'm just going to go back, and I just saw him do, just kind of completely paint over it. And I didn't take any photographs of it before, but the colors were much more kind of, I think, closer to like normal skin color would be. But it's funny because like I had that experience where it actually came out. So it's like I'm kind of like wondering if I should just sort of throw out the palette that all the books say and just sort of, I got the pigments there and actually just learn them from myself instead of looking at what other people have done, and something will come out of that. But I really appreciate what Father Damien's doing of being a traditionalist, that just making the board, which if we have time we'll get into. But like here at Abhayagiri is a good segue into that. We're, in terms of like monastic forms or Buddhist forms, we're one of the ultra-conservative, right-wing monasteries on the planet, probably, where we try to go right back to the Buddha, very, very conservative approach. And so like a lot of our, art in daily life is like, both Tankachan and I, we learned how to sew when we were here, and we sewed our robes, and a lot of things that we do. And I'll just give you a quick thing here. And so with the icon painting, Father Damien, just going right back to the beginning, it does give you a sense of not only safety, but just a lot of freedom to actually just to be. You already have the form, you already know what's there, but also too, you get to go deeper into, like say, I'm because I'm going to use raw pigments instead of just buying a tube of paint. I'm actually intrigued. Well, what is this made from? So I actually just went out and bought a book on what pigments or how they come about. Or I was just there and well, it was funny because he gave me this box, and I saw there was some pigment had gotten out of the box, and it was kind of blue pigment. And fortunately, I just moved into a cabin that was made for senior monks that come to visit, and we wanted someone in there at the winter just to make sure it doesn't have any leaks or anything. And so I've been staying it the last week. And so I got the pigments out and started painting, and I had to use the restroom. So I went in and used the restroom, and then looked in the mirror as I was washing my hands, and my face was all blue. I've been sitting there painting like this, and there's just a little bit of blue on the containers. All the containers had a little bit of blue, and I must have done this. I had a bindu across my forehead. Half of my face was all blue, and I was like, man, I am so glad. Because I would have come down here in the morning, gone through morning puja with a blue face, probably had breakfast, and probably given the morning reflection, and no one would have said anything to me. They'd all been going, "Oh, God, Jotipalo." And then I would have looked in the mirror after the meal and washed my hands, and I got a blue face, and no one said anything. So, going back to the traditional, so let's see, I have sewing. So here's Tankandanyo for his bhikkhu ordination this year. No file. There it is. We better turn the lights off for this. Wanted to, in Thailand, we usually the robes are dyed with a Gankanoon. What's the name of the tree? Is it the jackfruit tree? So it's just the center part of the tree, and it's really wonderful because it's actually an astringent, so it actually cleans the robe, and it actually, I think, makes the fabric stronger. Like the robes last a lot longer in Thailand than they do here when we wash them in the washing machine. But here he's making the dye, and he actually made it from when they did the shrine. When Yannick was making the shrine, they did a lot of, the sawing and cutting and sanding. So he took all of those parts. But he started by collecting all the leaves actually the skin of the trees, that kind of a similar color. So he had just a year just sort of gathering all this material and then just boiling it down, and amazingly it worked. It worked really well. And so here he is. Should have shrunk these file sizes. Here he is. Just that's all the tree bark. Yeah, it was madrone and manzanita. I think the madrone he said worked. See his finger there. And then he actually hand sewed his entire set of robes, all three of his robes. Most of us use a sewing machine. And even with a sewing machine, it can take 40 to 80 hours to sew an entire set of robes. He said it didn't take him. He was, every spare second of the day we didn't see him. He was sewing. So I could say he was up late at night. Has the essentials for sewing. See this dark chocolate there. There you go. And there, that's just like an example of the. It's not nearly as many stitches as you get with the sewing machine, but it works. And I guess this in Thailand, it's become at Wat Pah Nanachat, the monastery Ajahn Jotipalo helped found, and Ajahn Sumedho in Thailand, the Western monastery. I think the monks there are doing the robes by hand sewing them.
Double stitches borders, which is twice as much work as you need to do.
Yeah. So we added work to it. And then here, I think the next one is, then that's the color. It came out a little more pink than ours, and I think he may have actually made some adjustments to even bring it closer in. But here's the dyeing process. And this is, okay.
So does that color stay in, or does it?
You can sort of do things to fix it in a little bit, but you have to. I think when he washes it, he has to wash it in that solution. That's what you do in Thailand. You just do it in a milder solution of it. And I was going to show you a little bit. I think I will play it. But Ajahn Kongret, you might remember him, Dee, from the early days. That's him right over here. I made this card. We found this card, and I was like a similar hat. So I was called Ajahn Kongret as a child. But so this next bit I'm going to show you is I found this hilarious because I was watching. Let's see where I get to this. I was watching looking just to find some places where I could find examples of us doing things here, of learning and being creative, and I found this video of the monks actually. It's like, I don't know, it was like 2 hours of videos of our alms bowls, of firing our alms bowls. It's really funny listening to it just as Westerners, we give each other a hard time. We're always sort of jostling each other, especially guys, young guys. And there's a lot of one monk is trying to give instructions how to do it, and everybody's questioning him. And why don't you do it this way? Why don't you do it that way? And everybody's got their views and opinions. And I'm not being critical because I do the same thing, but just Westerners were slightly different. But I found these videos of how to make the rope. This is Ajahn Kongret.
Corner will be very, very beautiful. If the corner is not beautiful enough, it means your ankle will be something else. Now you see, it's straight line and flip on the edge like that. And stop exactly on the line that we just saw before and turn it over. To make another angle is to be about 90 degrees exactly, and start to go from there. It's about 5 centimeters as you see now. And then we trim along the edge. We trim over there, just make it soft. Do not trim too much, because if you trim too much, it will be easily to tear. And then we turn it over. As you can see now, we have a proper corner, and we take it out, flip it, and try to see the corner. Use your finger to rub it again. If it's a very perfect one, as I told you before, you can see everything, 3 corners will become one line, like that. What I want to show you, this line along here and this line along here will become one line. This one, another one, and always use the trim to trim everything.
Teaching another monk how to sew, and fortunately they made a video of it. But just gentle speech and playful, and if If we do it just perfectly, it'll perfectly just right. Yeah, so yeah, we spent a lot of time, sewing. And the beauty, like I was saying, like with Father Damien, like being a traditionalist, it's like when you sew a set of robes and it takes you 40 to 80 hours to do it, you take care of your robes. It's like, and you're also reminded that, like everything in the monastery, everything you're using that's here in the monastery has been donated. And so it's like, when you sew the robes and you're realizing that, that cloth came from somebody, the thread came from somebody, the sewing machine came from somebody, you take care of those things. And there's a real beauty in passing on that information to somebody else. And it really becomes an art. Oh, actually, I wanted to tell you that, like how to use art in daily life. Well, 3 days ago, I remembered from my speech professor in college that when you give a talk someplace, you should practice at the venue before you get there. And so everybody's really busy here, and so I kind of, Tankachana was very, very grateful to help me out. But as soon as we sat down, we're like, oh, this isn't going to work. It's like things aren't working. So we didn't have a cable that would stretch from over there to over here. It just has to be in this configuration. It was what kind of worked best. We could see there wasn't really much other way to do it. So we had to purchase this cable just so we could do this. So we bought it from Amazon, 24, next day shipment. It was supposed to be here yesterday, but we got an email this morning saying it'll be here by 8 o'clock tonight. So I was sort of like, that's unacceptable. I'm going to send someone down to UPS and we're going to get it. And so it was at the U.S. Postal Service. And so we sent Dorian down, and Dorian got there, and he could see that the place was locked. But in the back, there was a gate that was open, and no trespassing sign. And he was like, we know how post offices can be. If you kind of push them, sometimes they go ballistic. So it's like he was kind of scared to go in there. So we thought, I need to be casual about this. So he actually went to a coffee shop, went and bought himself a cup of coffee, and he was kind of wearing his work clothes, not wearing white, and had a big jacket on. He's just carrying his coffee, really casual, and kind of came up and could see him in there and kind of waved at him, his cup of coffee, and he came and said, "Can I ask you a question?" They kind of like, what are you talking about? And he's, "Oh, I know it's Sunday." And he said, the person was like, "Yeah, it's Sunday." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I feel sorry for you guys working." It's like, but we were supposed to get this package yesterday and it hasn't arrived. Here's the packing slip. Could you see about it? And they're like, "Yeah, I could do that." And they ended up going in the back and got the package and handed it to him, and and he got out with the package. And so we're doing this today. I was thinking, wow, what a beautiful, kind of performance piece he did. It's like that's a real art, because he actually knew going into it. It's like, if I go in like Jotipālo told me and get in there and demand the package, they're just going to say no. They're going to dig their heels in. But he was like, yeah, okay, I gotta act casual. Like, how do you act casual? Oh yeah, a cup of coffee, and he runs off and gets the coffee, and comes in and very tailored his speech exactly to that particular person. Yeah, it was manipulative, but a lot of art is actually, and so. I thought that was a beautiful example of bringing art into the real world. So, it was just speech and being beautiful, and I just felt that was nice. So let me see what else I had here in terms of. I wanted to show you one other thing, just in terms of what I think is like beautiful art. Photos, bowl stand. Could you go grab my alms bowl, or a alms bowl? So my partner in crime for the icon painting workshop was Tangkovilo. He's in Thailand right now, but so yeah, we spent a lot of time in the monastery learning crafts, things that we actually use and do in Thailand. Like you might make everything, and there was a monk here in the beginning, Ajahn Prateep, and he is just growing up in rural Thailand, like, he learned how to reuse everything. And like when I was living in Wat Pah Nanachat, they had we're making some bridges to go across these little irrigation ditches. And he was just using the bamboo that he was growing in the monastery to do it. But in order to kind of tie the posts up, I started looking at it, and it was old wire, like the ends of cables that, maybe the device broke and they no longer even make those UPS devices and stuff like that. So he kept the 10-foot long cables. He would just use those as rope. Just like, if you go around, you see all kind of innovative things like that. And so I found this on our Here, let me turn the lights on just for a second. Where's the bowl?
There you go. It's unconsecrated.
Okay. Yeah, so, all of the monks and novices, we all have our own alms bowl. And this one here, a lot of us have actually crocheted our own bowl covers, covers and the bowl covers, and make coverings for the straps. And so in Thailand, though, actually, Tong Kasapu, is this Kasapu's?
That's unconsecrated.
Yeah, so Kasapu actually made this bowl stand here at Abhayagiri, I think. So it's even done here in America. And I won't pass it around, but if you want to come up and look at it later, because it's not mine. But crochet maybe the stand and cover on the stand and everything. And you see it's a really tight weave. And if you're really skilled, you look at some of our bowls. Some of them have these really intricate designs in them. Most of us here haven't learned to be that creative, but about half of us probably have hand. I think all of us have hand crocheted bowl covers, but like half of us maybe have done our own. And so, but to make the stand, like what Cospo did, let me show you. This totally blew me away when I watched that. And I cut out about 75% of the photos in here. So starting with purely, raw materials, just like Father Damien was doing with the icons. I'm not sure what that is exactly, but here they are, just pieces of wood, using a little hatchet to cut them into little squares. So here's like the bundle. You see it kind of compared to the size of a hacksaw. Getting all the wooden pieces. Then they're hand carved. Every single one of those. I think there's like 200 or something like that. Each of these little pieces is hand carved. It's thicker on the edge, and thinner on the center. You see a better picture of it here. That's like what it started with, and ends up being like that. And you need it to be that thin, because then this is hand sewn. Just putting all these pieces together. You can see here, just hand sewing it to get that all sewn together. And you take two of these pieces, and then they kind of go inside of each other, and then you're able to twist it into a form like this. So you think, oh wow, what a great, you got a bowl stand right there, right? No. Then they tie the ends together, at least this one did, and they glue a little strip here on the outside. This is probably just to keep it in shape, keep the shape of it. Then, wow, what a beautiful bowl stand. No, okay, they're gonna finish it, so they cover over. I think I liked it before, but then they put this and they sand it down. Then they're tying some thread on here for some reason. And so you get this kind of effect on it. It's like, wow, that's probably like helps the grip on the floor or something. So what a great idea. No, okay, then he's going to put a little finishing piece on here on the side. Looks really nice. Beautiful. Oh, it's going to oil it. That's right, you got to do that. So it looks like that when it's oiled. Now, okay, they're doing something else more. I'm not sure what they're doing here. Got a tool to shape looks like shaping the piece of wood, whatever it is. Oh, okay, they're putting this thing around the bottom. Looks like actually like Kosovo's bowl. Oh, wow, it's beautiful. Okay, let's use it. Nope, okay, we gotta weave this thing around the bottom of it. Then they gotta do it, another weaving thing up here around the middle of it. Oh, okay, they're gonna put another decorative piece on there. Don't monks have anything better to do? This looks like an electrical cord right here. They're weaving an electrical cord into it. And there's your finished bowl stand. That's probably something like someone would give to their teacher, or somebody they had a lot of respect for. And isn't that beautiful? I mean, you should put that in a museum. So if you imagine, like taking the time to make that. The thing too is, it's just like like once you've known how to do it, and if you're making those, it's like, it can just be like walking meditation. You just actually when I had 10 years ago when I tried walking the Mississippi. I tried to walk from Mississippi to Canada. I got really, really ill, and for about a year I was almost bedridden, and so I couldn't do any walking meditation, and I was staying up in the duplex, and so I would meditate for an hour, and I'd crochet for an hour, and I'd meditate for an hour, and I'd crochet for an hour, just to kind of go back and forth. So these, once you kind of understand the form and how to do it, these can be a real strong sort of practice for mindfulness, just being present in your body, being present for what you're doing, and also just usually you'd be giving this away to somebody, so it's like you're having joy of being able to make something nice for somebody else. And it can be done for anything, like sewing. Actually, the robes I'm wearing right now, Kankantiko made these for me. I didn't even think I needed a set of robes, and he just made me a robe. So it didn't take him 80 hours to do it. It's one robe. Probably took him 15 to do that robe. But yeah, so you're doing something just to put forth some effort to do something nice for somebody. And you can use it as meditation practice. Let's see. And then one just real quickly here, this is some of the process of them making this all came from one tree out in the forest, kind of up by one of the cabins. It was a dead tree, and we were looking all over the place. We found a couple that could have worked, but they were really far away, and Ajahn Jotipalo found this one really close to a cabin by a road, so we felled it, and this is Andy, one of our neighbor in Redwood Valley, and he came over and just donated all of his time and effort to do this, and kind of guided us through it. And it's really beautiful. You can see here, it's like, instead of just cutting them as straight 2x4s or whatever, they're actually hand carved, so they almost kind of match the grain of the wood, and then they join them together by routing it out and then putting wedges into it, and they fit, they glued together, and then glued together and clamped. You see, it's a huge. I think it weighs 700 pounds. It actually fell over and broke one of the monk's fingers, and then they did a meticulous job of sanding. I think they went all the way down to almost 2,000 grit sandpaper. So you could play air hockey on it. It's kind of, and then this is just a top view of it. You can see that the work tables right there. This thing's huge, and that's the shape of the Buddha image. We were just kind of placing it on there to see how much space you had and what it looks like. But look at all these beautiful colors in it. So that'll be it's already in there, but that'll be the shrine for the new Buddha. So yeah, people using their creativity, using their energy to help make things, build things in the monastery. It's 4:00. I think I want to end with just a little bit of like chanting like we were playing earlier, and I thought we could actually kind of use that as meditation. I have a couple of things to play with that, but before we get into that, we have time for just discussion or questions. Or the day is rapidly. I was joking the other day. It's like I have about 100 hours of material. How are we going to get this into 3 hours? And so, yeah, I don't think it's actually a joke. There's definitely tons and tons of information about this. Any questions online?
Not right now. Oh, actually, yeah, no question.
Ajahn, something that came to mind when you were showing the bowl stand. I wonder if you visited the display in the Grace Hudson Museum in Ukiah.
With all the basket weaving.
Homo basket weaving.
Yeah, I've seen that before, yeah. Haven't seen the recent one. Yeah.
Maybe somebody like you've gotten into the icon painting with the neighboring monastery. One of your bowl stand experts will apprentice with a Homo basket maker in the local area.
Definitely the Thai. Northeast Thailand is known for that basket weaving. Yeah. It's interesting too, because also Northeast Thailand is known for candles. Really, they have festivals for candles. Mount Tabor is one of the things they use to make candles. So I took them one of the really fancy candles that comes from Thailand. They were really impressed. At least they said they were. Actually, these candles there were from Thailand. Were carved.
This past summer, I took a tour of, with a friend of mine, of the cathedrals in Tuscany and Florence. And she had, sort of outlined all these works of art we were going to see in each cathedral. And it was kind of like, after a couple of days, we sort of, I had like art overkill, and but what I was going to say is that, you see all this incredible art, which just sort of uplifts you, and it's all done for the churches, And then, there were a couple of things, like, my neighbor said, well, when you go to front, you've got to see the David, so you kind of go, you've seen it in about 1 million postcards, right? And on TV or whatever, and it's like, I almost resisted going, and then when you kind of get near it, there's like crowds building, and there's signs, and then there's a line, and then, you have to get a ticket, and you go through a metal detector. But the funny thing is, or the incredible thing is, when I actually got there, I kind of went resisting the whole experience, right? And then stood in front of it. It really has this power to transcend, this earth. I mean, just because you can't stop looking at it. The finish, when you were showing the table, it kind of reminded me when you talked about the sandpaper. Just the way it's finished, and you see the veins, and all this, that are made out of marble. So, I mean, it's really just your talk kind of inspired me. I kept thinking about this, about how art has this ability to, not only uplift us, but to sort of carry us to another realm that you keep talking about.
Yeah,
So that's it.
No, I totally relate with that. So this painting here, this imagery around the outside here, I said that's Islamic art. That came from this. We're inspired by that. Made a few of my own adjustments to it. But then last year I had the good fortune to go to Amaravati in England. And so they let me do a day trip with my friend, and we went into the London Museum. And my experience has always been with museums is half hour, and then any more than that's overload for me. I can only go like see one thing. Like I have a friend who's in Chicago, and I was telling him about these. My memory from childhood, actually, like 5th grade, we always go to the art museum. It was part of the Chicago Art Museum, part of our school. And I remember there were these statues, and all they had was just the heads, but they were Buddha heads. And I remember them being called lohans. And so I started doing some research online, and some of them lohan is like in the Mahayana tradition. They're making fun of the arhat. Like the arhat is selfish, like he's just worried about his own enlightenment. That's my understanding. But and so there's this one statue that I remember seeing, actually with Ajahn Jotipalo in New York, and it's a picture of a lohan, and he's sort of flipping his robe over, but he's kind of like casually, kind of like looking over to the side, like he's not quite being mindful, And it's just this beautiful image of this, being a monk and actually understanding, what's happening here with the flipping, and so it's just casual. And so I was telling about that. I said, I remember they had some of these statues in Chicago. Well, let's go. We were talking to Kat, and we went down to the museum, and I remember just going and looking at that. It meant so much more to me to have a relationship to that piece, and we saw that, and maybe a couple of other small things. But when we were in London, we went to the London Museum. It was a phenomenal museum, and we wanted to see the mummies, and everybody wants to see the mummies. We got there, and there were about 100 screaming kids, and so nobody wanted to see the mummies today. And so I wanted to see the Islamic art section because I'd done that painting. I came in, the very first object I saw was this tile, which I just used for my painting, and it was, they say it's that seeing it in person, or seeing it in the book is one thing. Like obviously I was taken by it, but to see it in person and actually have that relationship to it was just really. We couldn't believe I was staring at it, looking at it. Even though it's just a tile, but it has the ability to move an individual.
I was going to comment on I don't remember the name, the reverse perspective and something you said about the mandala, how when you're looking right on top of it, it makes sense, and then when you look from the side, it doesn't make sense.
But not so much it makes sense, but it's in symmetry. Everything's in like harmony. Everything's in symmetry. But then, like, we just look at a building that's completely symmetrical built building, and looking at it right from the top, everything's in symmetry. But as soon as you come off to the side, the other three windows are hidden, or you're seeing from different angles, and nothing's in symmetry at that point. So it's not necessarily wrong or anything. It's out of harmony.
Which I can't think of a better example to describe equanimity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even like mindfulness or being centered. Yeah, being centered and quiet.
How much it's about perspective and having a balanced perspective.
Ajahn Jotipalo talked about the right view, the right perspective. See, the perspective of an enlightened being is how they see the world. So when you come at it from that view. At first you don't see it, but oh, that's how things could be seen. And sort of then training yourself to put yourself in that spot where you can see it, which is the center, quiet. Not being distracted. So part of right view is silence.
Do you have to look at the person in the icon, like Jesus or Mary or so forth? Is you looking directly at them? Or
No, they're looking at you. They're like, Tony, what are you doing? But
do you have to be looking at them to see the rest of the image in the proper way, in order for it to all kind of have an impact on you?
I'm not sure. I don't know enough about it. It's really just I think a personal relationship with it. So it's however you relate to it. Yeah.
So I kind of hesitate to ask this question, but so as a writer and as a maker of music, most if not all of the work I do, at least as far as I can tell, has really no spiritual content. Obviously creative people aren't always the best of their own work. Sometimes stuff is coming out subliminally that we're not aware of. But since becoming a practitioner, I've had a bit of a dilemma about putting work out there that's in a way, and I'm only thinking of it now for the first time this way, is really depictions of samsara, depictions of people with emotions that they're attached to, love, attached love, anger, even some violence. And so I guess to some degree what I'm asking is, when one takes the precepts, the 8 precepts, there's that refraining from entertainments. And so I look at a lot of the work that I do as entertainment. I'm just wondering if there's a way that you can help me resolve the dilemma between creating work that, I don't know, in some ways may actually contribute to suffering in the world. I mean,
no,
I've looked at it from the point of view of, is there ego in it? And I don't feel like there is. I feel like I'm expressing, especially when, like you're talking about working and the time just flies by. And it's like, it's almost like it's come through me, that I'm not even really creating it. And so it's coming from somewhere. And then again, how do I know it's not coming from Satan?
Very well could be. Yeah, but I think one level is you're just even asking that question. That's contemplation. So it's your profession's already helping you to start learning how to contemplate. And so just hearing you say that, it's like, yeah, it could be worldly. And even like the things you were describing about it being worldly, though, I think a lot of art is just people trying to make sense of their world. So it's like, when you're writing about those things, or, it's like maybe that's how you've been writing because you weren't necessarily aware that there was a way out. But now that you've become a practitioner, it's like, well, how do you take those same stories? But, if your view is one of right view, and you're entering into it, you could still be writing about the same things, but there might be a different outcome. There might be a different twist to the story. And, you don't have to create that. It's when you understand it, if you're just having that question, keep asking those questions you just asked me. If you keep those four, it's like, keeping those four in the forefront, you might just miraculously find that your work is changing on its own. And so, Ajahn Sona was asked in one of his tea times a very similar question. It was this woman who was a filmmaker, and she was working for advertising. And she said, now that she's starting to become a practitioner, she actually feels like she's selling samsara. I mean, she is selling samsara. And it's like, so she had a real dilemma. And Ajahn Sona just sort of said, yeah, but like with his instruments, it's like, yeah, he loved them. Those were his passion. But when he sort of discovered, the joy that came from meditation, or the joy from living right livelihood, then he didn't have to give up the instruments. It's like, I wish I'd found some of my paintings that I did when I was a layperson. I was totally into whitewater kayaking. I mean, it was my love. It was my life. People ask what I did for a living. I told them I was a whitewater kayaker, but I sold screen printing ink as a way to support my habit. And I did a series of paintings on those. But as soon as I discovered meditation, it's like I never even wanted to. I just didn't even want to touch my kayaks. It was like what I got out of meditation. It's like I was trying to find that through kayaking and jumping out of airplanes and stuff like that. And but as soon as I discovered meditation, it's like it's like not necessarily boring, but it was too much work, or so it just naturally fell away. So what Ajahn Sona said to that woman is like, it's like if you still need to be making these movies, or in the advertising world to survive, and you haven't found another way to do it, and if there's something that's still drawing you to it, just be aware of that. Just be aware of the tension. You don't necessarily need to run away from it just because it doesn't feel good, but that is where you are. He said, but you might just find that you start, you still maybe like making movies, but maybe you'll start making movies of clouds, or, it just naturally have its own life, and then eventually, you may or may not pick it up or drop it. Like Reverend Hung Sure didn't touch an instrument for like 20 years, I think. And then we were playing some of his stuff. The homework was to listen to a couple of his songs, and he just picked it up because at a certain point he just felt like that was for him, it was like it was skillful to pick it up, to start creating. And but he for a long time didn't. So he actually received the benefits. Like it's like I didn't, for the first 8 years that I was a monk, I didn't do any painting, and I hadn't painted probably for like 8 years before that. So it was like something I picked up, and then I kind of totally feel like if I at some point it starts interfering with the practice, I'll probably be able to put it down, because it's like I'm always using it just to learn. And so that's where I'm a little bit different, where I'm not having to use it as an income. But yeah.
During those poems, the writings you did?
I did a few. I was talking to Tony time that I don't consider myself a very, very skilled writer, but occasionally, whenever I write a thing, it's because it wrote itself and it just popped into my head. Like I did not write it all. You may want to hear one? I'm not sure if I have it on my. I think it might be on my laptop or I'll see if it's here, but I don't think I have it. Good, I don't have it. I think it's on my thumb drive. Yeah. But I was telling Tony, I kind of remember the gist of it, but I was really into whitewater kayaking, and one night, after kayaking every night for like an entire week, I was like extremely tired, and I came down. I wrote a whole series of things like this, and it was always called Lying in Bed. That's it was like that was gonna, if I had enough stories, it was gonna be the title of the book. It was like after being really, like I was very into, like say jumping out of airplanes and stuff like that as a young man. That was like adrenaline sports. But I'd come back and I'd be exhausted. But when the body was really exhausted, my mind would just go quiet, and then all this creativity would come out because I wasn't painting at that point. So it was like looking for expression, and it would just, and these stories would just pop completely into my head. And this one is like, I'm in my room and it's gently raining outside, and just all of a sudden I just like jolt awake out of being frightened because I'm just remembering this waterfall I'd just gone off in my kayak and almost killed myself. And I was like, oh, I hear the rain and settle down in my bed, and I can hear the water coming through the gutter, and the gutter sort of tapping against the sound of the house, and it's just creating this like symphony sound of music. And I was like, the distant rumble of thunder would just make this a perfect moment. And then I started talking about running the waterfall, like all the thoughts that were going through my head. And it was really funny because like in the story, like I'm in this, just above this waterfall, and I'm in this, it's called an eddy, where the water sort of is more quiet, but I'm getting smashed into these rocks because of the waves. And I'm holding onto this rock, and I'm just describing this granite rock. It's just like all the different colors and textures in the thing. And then I noticed my fingers like freezing because there's a hole in my glove. We hike in the wintertime, and my fingers freezing. I'm like, why didn't I buy a new set of gloves? Like, why am I so cheap? Just like thinking about all these petty things, and all of a sudden I see it's my turn to go. It's like I'm sitting there complaining about my finger, and then have to go out into this current, and then just this story goes just as I'm going off the waterfall, and I realize, oh my God, I'm heading right for a rock. And then boom, then I wake up because the thunder outside my room is kind of brought me out of that dream. And then it's like, oh, the distant sound of thunder just made this a perfect moment. But the whole thing, like, it actually did happen, but the way it was written in the short story, I was like lying there and just jolted up and just was transcribing it. So, and that hasn't happened with my like painting, but I know other like musicians talk about, like, was it Mozart? Said he used to get in that state and would just sit at the edge of the universe and just write down what he was listening to. He didn't write it or think it out or strategize. He was just listening. And so, people have that experience. So we have 15 minutes left, so we don't keep. I guess I can keep talking till midnight if we wanted to. But talking about music, it's great that Neil had the last question there, because I played a little bit there at the beginning just to settle us down, that bit of the was it Plum Village, that chant, and but I'll play. Also starting off with the Christian, the Brother Seraphim ringing the temple bell. I found both of these chants. I love the Gregorian chanting, and talking to Ajahn Sona about Gregorian chanting and just in music. I was just up there earlier this summer, and he was pointing out, like what we do in the Theravada realm, he said, it's kind of funny, like, he was talking about like being in the symphony. It's like, it's a performance piece, it's art, just sort of, being in the orchestra. Like, if you're in the orchestra, you're expected to wear a suit or tie or tuxedo. They come and wearing their formal black, they're in their tuxedos, and you're expected to sit a certain way. You sit in this particular spot, versus where the orchestra is. And he says, what do we do here at Abhayagiri? It's like, the abbot sits there, the next monk sits here. The monks all wear this robe. We all wear it exactly the same way. And then it gets down to the novices, and they start wearing white. It's like we have our own, sort of, it's a performance piece. Talking about chanting. And I wanted to play this a little bit right here. I'll just play just a few seconds of this, but my favorite chanting. And it's not the most refined, I just find this mesmerizing. That's Polly. That's the same chanting that we do here. So you get really skilled chanters that can make it sound beautiful. That's a Parita chanting. Jaya Jotipalo.
From which country?
Thailand. Was it Thailand? It's a really skilled. It's funny. I heard that chant and really wanted to learn it. And then I was in Thailand and we heard that there was a monk who sort of showed up one day and then I mentioned to somebody that I wanted to learn that chant and they go, oh, that monk that was here at lunch today, he's from that monastery. And then I came back here, I was playing it to somebody and I was like, I don't know what this chant is or what the words are and stuff like that. And Ajahn Jotipalo was here, he's at a computer and I was telling it to somebody, he prints it out, he knew exactly what it was and he handed me the chant. Really sweet. The other day I gave a Dhamma talk on all the chants. Where that one is the other day? The Dhamma Pali. Here it goes. I'll just play this a few seconds. Maybe not play as much. This one. Dhamma, maybe.
මනුජස්ස කමත්ත චාරිනෝ තණ්හා වඩ්ඩති මාළුවාවිය සෝප්ලවති උරාහුරං පලමිච්ඡං වවනස්මින් වානරෝ යං ඒසා සහතේ ජම්මි තණ්හා ලෝකේ විසක්තිකා සෝකා තස්ස පවණ්ඩන්ති අභිවට්ටං වබීරණං යෝචේ සංසාති ජම්මින් තණ්හං ලෝකේ දුරච්චයං සෝකා තණ්හා කපතං.
That's Sri Lankan chanting. That's the Dhammapada verses of the Buddha uttered. And so it's slightly different style, but it can also be very meditative and quieting. But one thing Ajahn Sona was pointing out is like if you listen to say like Buddhist chants, especially kind of like Zen, it's they have the drums and the City of 10,000 Buddhas, so they're like it's like in the earth, in your body, kind of it's like the Buddhist chanting tends to be that way. This is a little kind of celestial, but it's just like one voice usually. Or what I was playing earlier was very beautiful, and if I'd played it a little bit longer, that one from Plum Village, they're like not harmony, but I forget what you call it, where you get two singers that are slightly off. What is it called? No, what is it? Contrapuntal. Could be, but anyway, it's really beautiful. But then we were talking about like the Gregorian chanting. And the thing I loved about the Gregorian chanting, and what Ajahn Sona was pointing out, is that Gregorian chant, I guess, isn't written to a score of music. And he said the reason is because every single time, like the choir, the people that are chanting it, they have to sort of be in harmony, or however they're. See, I'm not a musician, so I don't know the terminology, but they have to listen to each other, and each church has a different resonance. So like they'll start chanting, and then if they're listening to each other, and we have to do that here. We learn to listen to each other and harmonize our voices, and so they have to do that there. So it's like it's kind of interesting. It's more celestial. It's like you're kind of out of your body, almost listening to it, and it's not in the body, but it's still there's this cooperation you have to do, and you have to be listening to each other. And so I'll play. These were videos, but. I'll probably play both of them, but the last one I'll play this one first, and we'll end with this last one. I can play like about 5 minutes of this one, but here's just an example of, both of this is really beautiful. You'll see them singing. It's funny, this is the meditation for the end. Just let that music down to see, for me it brings energy. Like I can sometimes just, when I'm painting, I don't do it too often, but just like play that as a loop, just have that going in the background, and just really quite beautiful. Actually, all these chants that I've been, since I played that talk a couple of weeks ago, or gave that talk on the Sri Lankan monk chanting the Dhammapada. I've been like listening to it almost non-stop. This one I like too. I think these are both, Georgian. Starts off with a bunch of bell ringing, which we've already done.
but there was a question
Oh, yes.
Balaji asked.
Oh,
Like it seems similar to Neo's question.
did he
so.
answer how he's doing?
Yeah, he said it's fine. So, thank you. He's asking about similar to Neo's questions. If the chanting is in the musical form, to what extent it might be a violation of the seventh precept, and then I guess he would like to know the point beyond which it might become unskillful.
Well, if he's living by the 8 precepts, he should. If he's doing it like just on the observance days, things like that. Yeah, probably on those days he should not. If it's he's singing and dancing and part of the creating process, that day he might not do that. But if he's on the 5 precepts, you're not bound by that one. But it really just comes down to is like why are you doing? If it's really because it's entertainment. So like if you're doing it. It's a spiritual practice. It is like, we don't do singing and dancing, but yet you heard some of the Thai chanting is quite spectacular. It's beautiful, and so if it's used towards quieting your mind and uplifting, inspiring, then it's really looking at the intention behind it. So like hopefully if I ever with my paintings started doing it because I can get famous doing this, then that's probably the best time to stop. So it's really looking at your intentions, because that's not my intention at all. So any other questions? Actually, I don't want to. It's 4:30. We got to stop. Actually, why don't we bow to the shrine, and then I'll still stick around. So if anybody else wants to, and I think tea's being served in the house. Is that right? Yeah. So people can go and get tea, and I'll stay here for a little while longer. We just do three simple bows. Now, I forgot to show you my favorite one. I was hiding behind me here. One last thing is that I can pass these around. It's not as disgusting as it looks, but say we spend so much time. Like everything is donated, and how we take care of things. But there used to be a culture here, like during a winter retreat. While we're having tea, we'd all sit in here. We'd darn socks, and so pass those over there. But what I discovered is we get lots of like yarn and stuff like our thread that we never ever use. It's just like it's the wrong colors. But I discovered if you use if you get like 12 or 13 or 14 strands of this kind of strange colors and just make really long pieces, I'd make it into my own yarn. And then you'll see how fine you can do it by darning. Darning is basically you're just weaving a new piece of fabric. Pass them around separately, and then I tried to like match just the color of the cloth, but you'll see most of us kind of we darn our socks. Like those socks there probably aren't quite that old, but I've had a pair of socks the last 10 years just because I just keep darning it. Sometimes the entire bottom of the sock is nothing but the darn. Which I actually discovered at one point that I was talking to Santikaro. Used to be Santikaro Bhikkhu was with the Buddhadasa, and he was really into language. And I was saying, that phrase, like I don't give a darn. It's like most of us think it means like I don't give a beep, but it actually means it's like it's not worth a darn. It's like it's actually not worth darning. So it actually the language actually means something. And so, or I'll be darned. Yes. My ways will be mended. I'll be darned. Never thought of that. Okay. Cut me off, quick.
Okay.
What's that?
We're going to show Balaji the socks.
Yeah, can you have one of the socks to the camera? Do you have to stand far enough away from him? Or can you see what he's looking at?
You mind holding up the socks? Anyone else need to see a sock?
Is this turned off? Is that turned off? Are you recording?